Let me grab my paper here. Okay, I'm going to call to order the City Council special meeting. Will you all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'm a little bit out of order, but there's no AB 2449 teleconference requests, and Councilmember Venkatesh will be joining us a little bit later. So, let's do public comment for persons for matters not on the agenda. Each speaker is limited to 2 minutes. If there are more than 5 individuals wishing to speak during public comment, the mayor may choose to allow the first 5 speakers to speak during this time, and the balance of the public comment speakers will be called upon at the end of the meeting. Crystal, do we have any public comment?
There are no hands on Zoom, and I haven't received the speaker card for in person.
Okay, great. And after that, we'll move on to the study session. First, 5A is discuss the budget process and general overview. I'm assuming that's going to be Jeff and Rebecca.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm pleased to be here and able to have a study session with you on our recommended 2-year operating and 5-year capital budget today. I'd like to start by thanking Rebecca Mendenhall, the finance staff, and the staff from all of our departments for their hard work over the last few months in preparing the recommended budget for you so that we could be here today. Every time you put together a budget, and I've put together quite a few in the city now, it causes you to reflect on the past history. And, you know, the journey here today really started about 18 years ago when we really started to redesign our budget process, how our finances worked, our plan for the future. And we've really, throughout the last 18 years, have managed to stick pretty closely to that plan. And it's generated numerous successes in the past, numerous service increases, program increases for the community, and a lot of investment in our infrastructure, facilities, and programs here in San Carlos. The budget that we're presenting for you really kind of continues the story of change and adaptation that we started last year, where the council made significant changes to our operating budget, particularly with staffing in key departments. And this budget obviously continues those changes and then builds on them in a very significant way. Not so much in our operating budget this year, which has a few key changes, but for the most part is a continuation of the efforts and direction that we received from council last year, but rather in the capital budget. And so we're very proud to be recommending a capital budget with $187 million of spending over the next 5 years, where we're well more than doubling our investment in sewer infrastructure in the city from about $18 million for the last 5 years to, I think, about $55 million over the next 5 years. A capital budget that has really taken a lot of the comments and direction and discussion that we've heard from our council over the last couple of years in our community, and made significant adjustments to how we're going to fund and move forward with streets, sidewalks, safe routes to school, bike and pedestrian projects in our community, going from spending about $17 million over the last 5 years, and that was after the council made some pretty significant increases during that 5-year period to the program, to about $49 million of spending over the next 5 years. in addition to the $186 million that we're proposing to invest in city infrastructure in the coming year, as you're aware, there's a number of development projects proposed and a number that have now been approved on the east side in San Carlos, and they'll be making significant investment into infrastructure in the areas surrounding those projects as well. So we'll see a lot of upgrades to our street network, our sidewalk, our traffic system, and bike safety and pedestrian projects in the coming 5 years if the council agrees with us and moves forward with these recommendations. Overall, having spent a lot of time over the last few months with our Administrative Services Director, Rebecca Mendenhall, we have a high degree of confidence that our budget looks good, our revenues look solid, our expenditures look balanced. We have a very structurally stable situation. Your reserves remain very strong. We're in the capital budget spending, we're beginning to draw down balance funds that we've accumulated over past years. These, we didn't accumulate the funding because of any sort of policy direction or desire to just accumulate funds, but rather we were accumulating funds faster than we could program and spend them, which is why we made the adjustments we did last year in terms of our staffing levels so that we could handle a more robust project schedule over the course of the coming years. So we're very confident that we'll be able to meet the projections both on the expenditure side and the revenue side now and into the future. And if some very unforeseen circumstances, economic circumstances were to arise, major economic downturns, you have accumulated very substantial and set aside very substantial reserves to help you if you were to find yourself in a situation in the future where you needed to start thinking about some adjustments. So you've got a lot of options and a lot of resources at your disposal as you go about tackling the difficult job of governing a community over the coming years. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Rebecca Mendenhall to kind of get us started on the details.
Good afternoon, Rebecca Mendenhall, Administrative Services Director. So before I get started, I also want to thank staff, all staff, not just my staff, but all the departments. As you can see, there's a number of them here today. It's a process. The budget is a living document. It's constantly changing. We're updating projections as we go. And so, with everyone's help, we were able to bring this document forward today. I'd especially like to thank the finance staff, including Carrie, Marco, Tammy, and Maddie for their help. Oh, and Jenny. Jenny did a lot on the performance measures. So this afternoon, we have a few presentations. It's actually 4 sections. There'll be a general overview. I'm going to go over the process, how we've got to where we are today, talk about the projections for this fiscal year. Then the departments will present what they do and their goals and accomplishments. And then we'll get into the recommendations a little later today, and then finally the capital improvement program. So looking back 15 years, so over the last 15 years, we've had the Great Recession of 2009 and the COVID crisis of 2020. But yet the city has been able to maintain positive fund balances due to our conservative budgeting and our fiscal controls. So from 2008 to 2023, the San Carlos City revenue has grown on average 5.7% per year. At the same time, the expenditures have grown on average by 4.4% per year. This has generated annual average operating surpluses before any one-time expenses of about $5 million a year. This gives us the opportunity to take these savings and invest them into our capital program, as well as pay down any long-term obligations. So looking at property tax, this is our largest revenue source. And as shown here, the tax assessment rolls have grown 128%, or $7.4 billion over the last 15 years. This creates a stable revenue stream as values are locked in due to Prop 13 and grow at a rate of up to 2% per year. In addition to property tax, our sales tax revenue has also grown 85% over the past 15 years. Our sales tax base is diverse, so we don't rely on just one category. So for example, if we had a number of car dealerships in town, we would have seen our revenue drop from each economic downturn. But since we don't have that, we have pretty much an array of different categories we were able to maintain. Our building and construction category continues to grow since we're centrally located, and residential and commercial development continues to grow. So in fiscal year 2018 and fiscal year 2020, the city made a total of $12 million in one-time paydowns of our unfunded liabilities. This has resulted in annual and long-term savings. If we had not done this, the trajectory of these pension costs would have gone the other way. And in addition to one-time payments, we began tiering our retirement plans in 2009, well before the state passed the Public Employees Pension Reform Act of 2013. This pension tiering also saved annual costs over the years, as the higher pension plans have now been closed. Before we did this, the expected annual miscellaneous employer rates were well above 20%. As of today, our weighted average normal rate is about 12%. So as a comparison, we went and we pulled the financial statements from some of the neighboring agencies. And this chart shows the per capita net pension liability compared to those agencies. As you can see, the city of San Carlos's pension liability is lower than anyone else on this list at less than $600 per capita, as compared to Redwood City, which is closer to $2,200. In addition to paying down our unfunded liabilities, the city also operates very efficiently. This chart reflects the total staff per capita, even after adding the 14 new full-time employees last fiscal year. Lastly, our safety costs per capita continue to be less than average since we outsourced our departments, leveraging the cost savings of shared administrations and services. As a quick comparison, we pulled the budget from our neighbor to the north, and their police department budget is $14.8 million. Our police department budget for fiscal year 2023 was $11.8 million. So all that said, even though we've been able to navigate the ups and downs of the economy, there's still threats on the horizon. These include climate change and the effects on our resources, including wildfire and flooding. As I'll discuss in the next section, there were significant costs incurred as a result of the winter storms and flooding that had not been budgeted for, but we were able to cover from other budgeted savings. Significant costs related to infrastructure and keeping up with street resurfacing, as well as storm channel maintenance that we'll talk about a little bit later as part of the capital project budget, and the rising cost of public safety and the continued uncertainties with CalPERS and investment rates. So with that said, I'll move more into the details of the budget. So this is actually one of my favorite slides in the budget. It shows how complex the city's finances are. We have 19 different funds. When we talk about the city budget, we normally focus on the general fund because the general fund is the primary operating fund of the city, and it's used for most day-to-day activities, including the revenue is property tax, sales tax, but it also covers most of our city departments: community development, parks and recreation, city administration. But there are other funds as well. So we have the enterprise fund, which is our wastewater or sewer fund. This is used to account for the sewage treatment, transmission, major replacements, and improvements to the city's sewer system. This is an enterprise fund, so only revenues received can only be used to fund sewer-related projects. Other revenue funds are used to account for revenue sources for which expenditures are restricted by law or administrative action. These include the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System Fund, or the NPDS Fund, the Police Grants Fund, and the Library Tenant Fund. The capital project funds include equipment replacement and a number of other funds that we will talk about more this afternoon. The city's debt service fund is used to account for the accumulation of annual tax levies that are earmarked for the payment of principal and interest for the 2015 general obligation bonds that we used to finance the construction of the library. And finally, the internal service funds are used to account for special activities and services performed by designated department for other departments on a cost reimbursement basis. And this includes workers' comp, general liability, and post-employment benefits. So in June 2008, the City Council took action and approved financial policies formalizing long-standing practices that have been used in the past to prepare the budget. The policies were established to ensure that the city's finances are managed in a manner that will continue to provide for the delivery of quality services, maintain and enhance service delivery as the community grows in accordance with the general plan, guarantee a balanced budget, assuring the city is always living within its means, and establishing reserves necessary to meet known and unknown future obligations. A copy of the financial policies has been included in your packet beginning on page 11. There are no recommended changes at this time, and we'll be bringing the policies forward for your approval on another agenda. So moving into the projected performance for this fiscal year. As noted earlier, we continue to have positive financial outcomes. Our revenues this year are projected to be higher by about $6.5 million. And most of this variance is related to one-time revenues and reimbursements. I'll cover a few of the larger variances now. Business registration revenue is projected to be $160,000 over budget, and that can be attributed to the outsourcing of that function that we did a couple of years ago. The third party that we outsourced to has more people and more resources to ensure compliance, and we record this on a cash basis, so we've seen some of our collections pick up there. Our charges for service revenue is projected to be $3 million over budget, and this is a direct result of the plan check fees from larger developments at 642 Corey, 1021 Howard, 405 Industrial, 888 Branston, and 987 Commercial Street. These large plan check fees are not budgeted because the timing of these receipt of these funds can vary depending on the timing of when they pull their permits. So it's highly unusual to receive this many in one fiscal year, but we're going to benefit from it as it will help drive our surplus. The revenue projected from other agencies is $111,000, and that is one-time funding that we received from FEMA related to the COVID emergency. So this was 2 years in the making, but we finally received those funds. The projected property tax revenue is an increase of $500,000 over budget. This revenue is estimated based on information from the county as well as a third-party consultant that we use. And the primary reason for this increase is increases in the property tax assessment rolls, as I showed earlier. You can see how that trajectory is going up. The assessment rolls just in 1 year increased 13% over the last fiscal year. Our sales tax revenue is projected to be $500,000 over budget. This growth has continued mostly in the categories of business and industry, fuel and service stations, general consumer goods, and restaurants and hotels. Restaurants have experienced a strong uptick with increased prices and a continued desire to dine out following the COVID crisis. The projected transient occupancy tax revenue, or hotel tax, represents a decrease of $400,000 from budget. And although the hotel industry began to rally in fiscal year 22 following COVID, the industry has not yet returned to historical occupancy rates as business travel has not yet fully returned to pre-pandemic times. The projected vehicle in lieu revenue represents an increase of $2.2 million from the revised budget, and this is based on information from the County Controller's Office. The revenue received this fiscal year includes a one-time payment also of $2.2 million, and this is a repayment from the shortfall that we had 2 years ago that were finally received this year. Expenditures are projected to be $860,000 less than the revised budget, but this is primarily due to salary savings from vacant positions held during the year. The fiscal year 23 budget added 14 new positions, but recruitment for each of these new positions takes 3 to 6 months to fill. In addition, some of those recruitments were very hard to fill, and we did have a few of them fail. So that just extended the time period to fill those positions, which also extended or increased our salary savings. And these salary savings were offset by approximately $1 million of unanticipated expenses related to the January storms and all the flooding. So several years ago, we began the process to transition from annual department budgeting to a full program and performance biennial budget. So program and performance budgeting focuses decisions around results and services versus organizational units. So the departments are going to present an overview of their department, their accomplishments, and their goals for the next 2 years. The performance measures have been included in your packet for your review, and they'll also be published as part of the budget. So before we move to the department, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those now.
Thank you, Rebecca. I think we can do some quick questions if we have on this. Before we go to questions, I just wanted to make a quick statement, just a quick thank you to you and to your team and all the departments for putting this together, time and effort that comes into this. I know it's a lot of work, but I know I will speak on behalf of the council. I think the prudent management that has happened over the number of years, we're certainly seeing the benefits of that. And I know when we talk to council members from other cities, they're not as fortunate often. They are scrambling to try to make ends work on things. So I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this. We had a fantastic year, and we're not quite done with this fiscal year, but we're doing well. And we've got a lot of exciting projects ahead, as Jeff mentioned. And there's a lot going on in the city, and we have a fantastic set of managers and department heads, and really a wonderful team in the city. And we're all proud of you and the work you do, and are looking forward to today's meeting. Any questions for Rebecca? Okay, if not, we will.
Okay,
go.
we'll move into
Go
the.
ahead. I'm sorry. My thing is not turned on, Ron. There you go. Oh, Ron, Councilmember Collins, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo the mayor's comments, and thank you from me personally. Also, thank you for the opportunity to have been briefed a couple days ago by you and Jeff over the upcoming budget. That really answered a lot of questions. It reduces me really to one question right now, and that is, you mentioned that the sewer funds, there's the enterprise funds, that there's a lot of work to do on that. Are those supplemental to what the ratepayers pay to Silicon Valley Clean Water? Is that work that we do on top of what they do, or do we contribute to what they do?
A little of both. So those sewer rates go into the enterprise fund, and it funds the actual operations of the plant for Silicon Valley Clean Water. It also funds the capital programs at the plant. But we have our own pipes and our own system and our own pump stations that need to be maintained and improved. And we'll be talking about some of those projects later today.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, so we'll turn it over. I think Niall might be next. And then we'll do all the presentations and then take questions from the council after everyone goes. So we'll try to be more efficient that way.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and council members. Niall Blackburn, Assistant City Manager. I'll be presenting for the City Manager's office today. Our small department is led by our City Manager, Jeff Maltby. And we've had a lot of changes over the past 18 months. I came on board at the end of 2021. We hired a management analyst. We underfilled the senior management analyst position with the management analyst. In March last year, we brought on board a communications coordinator, which is represented by the management analyst in orange in the square in the org chart, because that's one of the positions we're hoping to reclass. And we're restarting the internship program this summer for the first time in several years. The city manager's office oversees all city operations, departments, and programs. We implement the city council's strategic plan. We oversee community relations and engagement. We promote sustainability initiatives, oversee emergency management services, and monitor and promote the city's legislative agenda. I'm going to focus on two of those categories, mostly community engagement and sustainability during my time now. We're all familiar with the amount of publications the office produces. Our Spotlight and Good Living newsletters that go out to the community 6 to 8 times a year are very popular. They're print. Also very popular, we learned in a recent survey, is our electronic council newsletter. Because of the additional resources that we've been able to have and use, we've been able to do a lot more than what the department may have traditionally done. Last year, as part of the mayor's mental health awareness initiative, we produced an 18-page brochure that was mailed to every resident in San Carlos about the mental health services available to them at the local level, regional level, and national level. We were also able to coordinate with the county and host 2 training sessions, mental health first aid training sessions. At the request of the sheriff's office, we reached out to CORA, Community Overcoming Relationship Abuse, and were able to promote their services on one of our billboards. We were also able to work with the Colin Walker Family Memorial Foundation and promote fentanyl awareness, which you see on one of our billboards there. We collaborated with the Community Foundation for the September 8th Children's Fund. We supported our local businesses by producing an ADA laws and business compliance brochure that we shared with everyone. And I think you're all familiar with the amount of communications we put out in real time related to the 22-23 storms on our website, and then in daily communications to our council and community. And we also are doing a lot in terms of knowledge sharing and best practices. And I love this picture in the top corner. You see members at a CAPIO conference, California Public Information Officers, and our communications coordinator, Krissa, is pointing to the screen. She presented along with our partners in Foster City and Belmont on best practices to that big group. We've been doing a lot of work internally among our departments. We now, because of the size of our team, are able to have monthly meetings with Public Works, Community Development, and Parks and Recreation. And the value in this is that we can meet with them, understand what's coming, and put out proactive, strategic communications. And we've built a communications calendar. From what I understand, other cities, including Santa Barbara, are very interested in learning more about our calendar and our request forms. Our team worked with Public Works and Community Development to create a current projects page on our website. In the center, you can see a screenshot of our webpage. A resident can click on any number of those colored areas and hover over it and find out more about a particular project. And we've done about several dozens of customized outreach and communications for various departments, including a small business spotlight that we worked with economic development on. Public Works, we've worked on the Greater East San Carlos Traffic Calming Project and hosted at least 4 community events. We have done communications for the San Carlos Avenue Phase 3 project. Up on the right corner, you can see a customized HR job posting that was created by our team. And currently, we're working on a notifications page on our website for upcoming public hearings. One thing I'm most excited about is the amount of internal communications and engagement we're doing. Our team has grown, and we want to make sure that we can maintain the sense of community and togetherness and collaboration that this group has always had. One way we're trying to do that is through employee meet and greets, getting to know folks from different departments. We started a monthly employee newsletter that's published out of the city manager's office. And there we highlight a specific employee, we do an interview, we find out about different jobs in the city, we do shout outs where we thank each other, and then we're trying to do less formal updates on what's happening in different departments by different members of the department. More recently, we started a Toastmasters chapter, which is a speech writing, speaking group. And more than just learning how to hone and develop our speaking skills, we're also hoping to interact more across departments. And pictured in the top right is our first meeting where we have representatives from different departments. And we have 22 new members. Oops. Thanks. What's coming? I think we're most excited about our new website and intranet. A new website is more than just a new user interface and pictures. We're spending a lot of time these past 8 months meeting with different departments to really work on understanding how the department works, how the community digests the information, and developing a whole new information architecture. So, for example, if someone wants to know what's happening or sign up for city communications, they don't have to click on government, then departments, and then city manager's office, and then community news. Hopefully they'll be able to find it right up in front and center going forward. We also have a task force of city management analysts led by our management analysts to revisit and analyze the Citizens Academy and figure out ways to improve it, and we hope to roll that out in the fall. Moving on to sustainability, climate change mitigation, adaptation, and resilience is one of our 7 strategic goals as a city. And our senior sustainability analyst, Adam's been very busy this year. In terms of community engagement, he's hosted a dot voting exercise at the farmers market, a home electrification workshop in December. A couple weeks ago, for the first farmers market, he hosted, in collaboration with Parks and Recreation, an Earth Day event where we invited a lot of regional partners. He has developed in November an outreach strategy and print materials to engage with multifamily property owners to promote EV charging, composting, and other programs. He's applied for and received a few grants on the city's behalf, including a streamlined solar permitting tool from the California Energy Commission, a water heater replacement from PG&E for our water heater at Fire Station 13, and funding to install EV charging in Wheeler Plaza. He's been able to get efficiency audits at 4 of our city facilities in collaboration with with Public Works. And also, he'll be working with Public Works to coordinate with PCE to install a rooftop solar on the youth center. One thing I'm really excited about is the work we're doing regionally. We've hosted 2 sessions. One was a multi-jurisdictional, multidisciplinary team with members of our team, and one shoreline to invite the city of Burlingame to share its best practices with us regarding creek setbacks, buffer zones, and minimum floor elevations. And also, we invited Burlingame again to talk to us about their Adopt a Drain program that we were considering. In the year ahead, we're going to continue to work with PCE to administer funds for EV charging and an EV charging incentive program. We're working on a fee study to develop an in-lieu fee to offset greenhouse gas emissions associated with projects that are exempted from the city's all-electric REACH code. And we're going to continue to coordinate and collaborate with our regional partners and staff on solutions related to sea level rise and rising groundwater and flood protection. And I will turn things over for questions.
Okay, I think we're going to wait to the end and then I'll
Okay.
do questions so we can do it all at once.
Got it.
Thank you for that presentation. And I think next we have Crystal. This is great. Crystal's never on this side of the dais.
Yes, this is a little different. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Crystal Moy, your City Clerk. As that says, we are a tiny department of 2 full-time employees, myself and an administrative assistant who I'm proposing to reclass this year as a Deputy City Clerk. The City Clerk's office consists, we operate under one program. That's the Council and City Manager support. And so major services under this program include managing the agenda process for the Council, And then we also provide council support before, during, and after meetings. So that includes preparing proclamations, preparing the meetings, the minutes after the meeting, and ensuring that all council-approved documents, such as the contracts, resolutions, ordinances, are properly recorded and legally published. Our office also manages the elections process for the city. That includes meeting with residents who are interested in the council and treasurer seat and walking them through the process to run for office. And then we also work closely with the county to get our vote centers and the ballot drop boxes all ready for our voters. And then after the election, we provide orientation for the newly elected officials. We also manage the recruitment process for city commissions and boards, and then provide an orientation for those newly appointed commissioners. I serve as the compliance officer for the Fair Political Practices Commission, and so I work with the designated officials to ensure that you guys properly file campaign statements and as well as statement of economic interest. The department serves as the records manager for the city, and so as such, we conduct research and retrieval of records for staff as well as for members of the public according to our Public Records Act. And we also maintain the city's records retention schedule. And we also manage the mailroom for the city. Here are some accomplishments from our department this fiscal year. The ones shown here on this slide are examples of how we meet the city's core values of demonstrating high ethical and professional standards, including high quality customer service. And in the clerk's office, we see our customers as both internal staff and the public as well. So this year, we implemented a new agenda management system for the city and provided the training for all internal users. And this system helps to streamline the agenda process for staff and makes it easy for the public to be able to find upcoming and archived public meeting documents. We work with staff from all departments and processed 383 public records requests so far this year. And then we've also conducted a few requests for proposals. We had a publication of legal notices vendor that we were able to obtain. And then we have a broadcasting production of public meetings and document scanning services. The accomplishments listed on this slide are examples of how our department meets another core value of the city, which is to lead and manage effectively by engaging our community. So we conducted a municipal election for 3 city council seats and onboarded a newly elected council member. We managed recruitments to fill 3 commission seats and 19 new commissioners for the Downtown Advisory Committee, and then we orientated those 24 newly appointed members. We also developed and implemented a process to conduct hybrid council meetings for council and for our Planning and Transportation Commission. And this year, we transitioned to having an option for council to participate remotely in their meetings through Assembly Bill 2449. And so we had to work to ensure that a number of the steps were in place so that we were in compliance with that bill. And that includes creating and getting a reasonable accommodations policy adopted. And then lastly, we hosted a Council of Cities event, and that's where council members throughout the county attended, and we had a great turnout last week on that. In addition to continuing with all our work that's below the iceberg, our goals for the coming years are listed here. We will be creating a records management policy and providing a tailored training to each department that'll help kind of make things a little bit more applicable to them and show them how everything kind of relates to their department. We'll be looking for a new vendor for helping to codify our ordinances into our municipal code. So we'll be doing an RFP for that later in the fall. And in fiscal year 25, we'll need to update our conflict of interest code, and then we'll be conducting another general municipal election in November. So we'll hold off on questions. Moving on to ASD.
Thank you, Crystal. And Rebecca's coming back.
You're going to get to see a lot of me today. Okay. So my department, here's a quick overview, a visual representation of my department. It's made up of 15 employees plus a position that I'm proposing to be included in the next budget, and we'll talk more about that later. Our department's made up of 4 divisions: administration and risk management, finance, human resources, and information technology. So we're mostly behind the scenes, but we keep the city running. So the first division is administration and risk management. We cover the strategic planning and our general liability and workers' compensation programs. In addition to being a participant of the Joint Powers Authority or the General Liability Program and the Workers' Compensation Program Board of Directors, I actually serve as the president of the Pooled Liability Assurance Network, or the PLAN JPA, and Jenny Liu serves as the president of the Cities Group, or the Workers' Comp JPA. A quick highlight of this division's accomplishments is the award of the FEMA grant money that I talked about earlier from the COVID emergency. This is above and beyond the ARPA money that we received. So this was reimbursement for, just the general supplies that we had to purchase, and the masks, the PPE, and all of that. It took 2 years to get, so it was quite an accomplishment. And the next 2-year goals also include working with FEMA. I think Jenny's made some friends there. And we're already working with them on the recovery of all the costs associated with the winter storms in December and January. So aside from what we're doing here today with the budget, the Finance Division does all of the annual financial reporting, including the annual audit. They do accounts receivable, accounts payable, and what's near and dear to every employee's heart is payroll. We also manage the business registration function. So in addition to doing the financial services for the city, we also provide similar services to the CCAG, JPA, and commute.org. Over the past 2 years, the Finance Division has replaced the city's cashiering system to allow for more online payments. We collaborated with the Parks and Rec Department on special events and helped with the ticketing at Hometown Days. And we also assisted Public Works with the rate study. The next 2-year goals include updating the cash handling procedure manual to memorialize processes that we've already implemented, and look at ways to make the accounts payable process or the purchasing process more efficient. The Human Resources Division is responsible for all employee and labor relations and recruitment. And over the past 2 years, we've modified the new hire orientation process and implemented a longer-term telecommuting policy. And over the next 2 years, HR will be supporting the upcoming labor negotiations, and will also look at recruitment efforts to help the city recruit and maintain a diverse workforce. The IT division provides technology support to all departments and manages our network infrastructure, and most importantly, our cybersecurity programs. Over the past 2 years, they've assisted finance on the cashiering system and implemented additional security programs to enhance our cybersecurity programs. So we also did a comprehensive cybersecurity audit with a third party, and we completed that successfully. And we've been told that we are way ahead of most jurisdictions in that area. So over the next 2 years, IT will complete the firewall upgrade and work on projects that we're going to discuss later today as part of the capital program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Al.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Al Savay, Community and Economic Development Director. There we go. In community development, we have 23 regular full-time employees and 4.2 FTEs for planning contractors and 1 FTE for code enforcement officer over 4 divisions. And we provide a wide range of services through our 4 divisions, which requires a diverse set of skills and capabilities. The key to success of our team of well-trained and motivated professional staff who provide best-in-class services and experience, expertise each and every day. The Community Development Department is divided into 4 divisions, as you see there, and we have advanced planning, current planning, building and code enforcement, and economic development and housing. And I'll walk you through these divisions and talk about some of the accomplishments and goals. Our advanced planning division looks out to the future of our city, and this division prepares plans to help thoughtfully manage new growth and to implement City Council strategic objectives. And in the last few years, the sheer volume and impact of new state laws for housing, land use, open space, and fire safety will require cities throughout the state to devote significant resources to responding to these requirements for many years to come. This last year, we completed the most significant housing update that I've ever seen in my career, certainly, and it was the largest number of housing units required by the Regional Housing Needs Assessment of the city of San Carlos, I think, in its history. And we completed the housing element, and the City Council adopted it in time to avoid the loss of local zoning control through something that is referred to as the builder's remedy. We were one of 14 cities in the 109 city Bay Area region to do this, and it was an extraordinary task. One thing that didn't get mentioned much, and you may not be aware of this, but we were the only city in San Mateo County to also complete the zoning along with it. And the zoning is really the implementing law that would implement our housing element. So we got it done at the same time. We may be the only city in the Bay Area that actually did both at the same time. It's just a Herculean task to do the housing element, but we were able to do both, which is quite unique. We also kicked off the downtown plan and the Northeast Pacific plan, and we're making steady progress on these critical and transformative plans for the city. And we will need to reset our build-out numbers in the general plan, and we're required by state law now, and this is a new law, to update our general plan open space element. So you'll see a capital improvement project in your packet for that. So we have 2 divisions, current planning and advanced planning, and I mentioned advanced planning. In the current planning, when you walk into City Hall, our development services counter, and you see a picture of it there, is usually the first thing that you see. And current planning is our day-to-day city planning work. Our residents, businesses, and property owners come in contact with current planning staff on a daily basis, along with the building officials, and we're customer service focused. Current planning works with people to make sure their projects conform to city ordinances and they can get their permits quickly. These planners also use their training and expertise to prepare new ordinances or adjust what we have to address critical issues affecting our community, such as child care, tree preservation, and ADUs. So to touch on some of the initiatives in current planning, the objective design standards for single-family residential and multifamily standards is required by state law and will streamline our development review process. Current planning includes project management for the larger key development projects that we've been seeing on the east side, and commercial development over there, and housing projects that we're seeing along the El Camino Real corridor in and around downtown as well. So they process both of those types of development. in addition to single-family residential projects and working with our local businesses. We continue to work to improve our standards and processes for childcare, and we'll be coming forward with zoning code changes to further improve processing of ADUs. Now, the building division is where everybody wants to, finally get to. It's where the rubber meets the road in terms of issuance of building permits, so people can get moving on what they're doing with their housing, their houses, additions, and working with our business community on their improvements. The work that the building department does through plan checking and inspections ensures that our housing stock in our commercial buildings are safe for occupancy from a life safety standpoint. Code enforcement keeps our community looking good, and our code enforcement officer responds to a wide range of health and safety issues as well. We continue to focus on delivery of fast and efficient and thorough plan checks and inspections, and this is really, it's continuous improvement. We don't just rest on our laurels. We're always looking at our systems and trying to improve and make things smoother. In the last few years, we have seen a significant uptick in the size and scale of permit activity, and we've aligned our services and systems to maintain and enhance the user experience. Economic development works closely with our business sector and provides analytics and research to help us understand the fiscal impacts of new plans and policies, as well as marketplace dynamics. And this division is where we have the capability to ensure that the city maintains its economic diversity and sustainability and resiliency, so we can provide the critical services and programs to maintain our public infrastructure and services. San Carlos has expanded its level of expertise and focus in economic development over the last decade or more. And economic development staff has helped us to require new commercial development to pay a fair share of costs for important needs, such as child care and affordable housing. The division has also been instrumental in developing and managing revenue sources for new below-market rate housing. On the housing side, our Economic Development and Housing Division manages our housing policy as well as our below-market rate fees that we have been collecting through commercial linkage fee associated with new development. And these fees have allowed the city to acquire property and partner with nonprofits to develop new affordable housing projects in our community, such as the Walnut Studios that was completed last year, and that was a 23-unit, 100% affordable housing project. Our housing division does the technical work and leverages their expertise in real estate analytics and transactions to move projects forward to completion. And the city's 1232 Cherry Street project for 30 BMR family housing units with HIP Housing and Eden Housing is moving forward. And these projects are really incredibly complex, and it's very unique that a city of our size has been able to develop this in-house capacity to do these types of projects. And with that, I'm going to conclude the presentation, and I'm pleased to have had the opportunity to quickly share an overview of the Community Development Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Al.
Yes.
And I think we've got Amy Newby next.
Good afternoon, Mayor Rack and council members. Amy Newby, Parks and Recreation Director. Joining me today from Parks and Recreation are Tyler Muella, Caitlin Matoso, and Wendy Scatino. Parks and Recreation consists of 13 full-time employees, and depending on the season, our part-time employee count ranges anywhere from 40 to 60 employees serving throughout all divisions in the department. We partner with over 50 contract instructors for our fee-based classes, camps, and other programs, as well as work with over 500 volunteers in youth sports, community events, and the Adult Community Center. Major services in leadership and management include working with our Parks, Recreation, and Culture Commission on projects and items of interest in the community that are focused on parks and recreation, events, and public art. Additionally, we oversee capital improvement projects for parks and recreation facilities. We work with volunteer residents and members of the community on Adopt a Project program. Some of these projects you may be familiar with include the Native Garden behind City Hall and the Pots on Laurel Street. We continue to collaborate with the Parks and Recreation Foundation of San Carlos in a variety of ways, hosting fundraising events in our parks, community event participation and sponsorship, and capital project funding. We continue to engage with the community in all ways with residents, participants, community organizations, and partners. And lastly, we facilitate community public art projects and programs. Aside from the 2 murals that were completed a year or 2 ago in partnership with the Community Foundation, we launched an artist rotation program at the Adult Community Center last year. Accomplishments in the last year include kicking off the final phase of the field lighting project and installing ball field lights at both Stadium Field and Flanagan Field. We had a big year of staff transition in Parks and Recreation and transitioned 8 full-time employees out of our 13 into new roles in our department. We completed the tree assessment project with Davey Tree Resource Group, providing a tree condition report for roughly 5,000 trees on city-owned property and parks. This also included recommendations for maintenance and care. We completed a new agreement with the foundation as a community event partner. And lastly, converted 2 tennis courts at Highlands Park to multi-lined tennis and pickleball courts. Our upcoming goals for the 2023-2025 fiscal year include completing the field lighting project in late summer, early fall, and to continue to work in partnership with the foundation on funding opportunities and event sponsorship. Additionally, under the City Council's strategic plan, our other goals for the upcoming 2 years include the North Crestview Park Master Plan and General Parks Master Plan, as well as to continue to explore community trail opportunities and trail connection opportunities. Our athletics division coordinates sports camps, classes, and leagues for youth and adults year-round. Programs include those in partnership with contract instructors, but also programs run by our athletics part-time staff. Our athletic staff is responsible for gym rentals and sports field allocations for city and school district fields, a total of 9, scheduling field times for all youth sport organizations in the community. Staff also oversees approximately 150 volunteers and part-time staff. Volunteer coaches and part-time staff. Accomplishments this past year include a record number of participants in our youth basketball and flag football leagues, which run simultaneously, totaling over 700 participants. We worked with the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Commission and the community to update court use priorities at Highlands Park in order to provide priority times for pickleball. We also increased adult league participation and offerings, including an additional night of our bocce league and an increase in number of teams enrolled for adult basketball and cornhole leagues. Our goal for next year is to increase the number of sports programs offered with our part-time athletic staff, and this includes a new flag football camp that we are launching this summer. Youth Development coordinates the year-round free after-school program. We average about 60 to 70 kids per day. Each summer, we offer 9 weeks of adventure camp with our recreation leaders at Burton Park, the Youth Center, and Arguello Park. And a sub-program of camp is our LIGHT program for teens who have aged out of camp but are too young to be employed. The goal of this program is for participants to gain leadership experience in a camp setting while being mentored by experienced recreation leaders. This division also coordinates private rentals at the Youth Center for nonprofits and residents. Staff also advises the Youth Advisory Council, who meet on a monthly basis, and in the past year successfully coordinated cleanups, donation drives, hosted the Halloween Haunted House at the Youth Center, and a pop-up thrift shop this past weekend. This past year, we were able to resume the tutoring program at the Youth Center, contracting with the San Carlos School District teacher to provide free homework assistance after school. We also expanded mental health wellness awareness and programs to offer to participants, including trainings for our part-time staff, wellness, relaxation, and de-stressing activities, and we will be hosting a new event called the Middle School Real Talk with the Stanford Center for Youth Mental Health and Wellbeing. Our traditional events at the Youth Center return this year, including middle school dances with about 300 kids at each dance, kids' night out events, Monday night football watch parties, and a new event this year, pancakes and pickleball. going to see how many times I can say pickleball in this presentation. Our goals for the upcoming year will include an increase in participation in programs and continuing to work on positive youth conflict resolution in partnership with supportive community organizations. Our adult community center staff keeps busy all year long. As you know, the curbside lunch program continues to thrive, serving over 500 meals per week. We also offer free and reduced cost classes, which include fitness, art, music, and other special interest classes. We offer special events for seniors, including Pedro tournaments, a summer luau, pasta bingo nights, just to name a few. A handful of the events each year are also hosted in partnership with the Friends of the Adult Community Center. These include the crab feed, a summer barbecue, and coming up this year will be an Oktoberfest event. We resume the Trips and Tours program and chaperone seniors for day trip getaways to casinos, wineries, museums, and other local attractions. Additionally, each Tuesday, our staff hosts the Caring Cupboard Grocery Distribution Program, serving 95 households each week. This past year, we celebrated the 40th anniversary of the Adult Community Center. We hosted a party and welcomed over 150 community members who joined us in the celebration. We continued to work on the age-friendly projects and hosted a medical equipment loan program, or also known as MELP, pop-up event, and distributed medical equipment to seniors. The city also mailed out a city spotlight newsletter that Niall highlighted earlier, highlighting our programs and services for seniors. Staff reported an increase in membership and volunteers following this mailing. We served over 27,000 meals in the community this year, and we received 2 grants from the Sequoia Healthcare District to support both the meal program in the amount of $40,000 and for our fitness classes in the amount of $4,000. ACC goals for the upcoming year include to host a senior resource fair and to work on adding intergenerational programs with our youth center participants and YAC members. The Personal and Family Development Division is essentially all of our fee-based classes and camps, the activity guide production and mailing, customer service and registration, and picnic reservations. Accomplishments in the past year include increased class participation. This was one of the last programs to return to post-COVID enrollment numbers. Expanding the fee assistance program and providing more than $6,000 more in fee assistance than in the prior year. This fee assistance program is funded in partnership with the Parks and Recreation Foundation, and this was accomplished by removing the per family cap and increasing the per person cap and allowance and the percentage covered of the class fee. We also increased our picnic reservations, offering 7 reservable spaces at 4 of our park sites. Our goals for the upcoming year include continuing to assess our class offerings and explore new opportunities, and evaluating our online picnic reservation system to look for improved efficiencies for both staff, back-end use, and the customer's online experience. We also plan to monitor the fee assistance program changes and evaluate at the end of the year. And lastly, our special community events division. Aside from coordinating community events and managing volunteers, staff also is the primary manager of our department social media accounts. This all kept them busy in the last year, and we've seen the community turn out in great numbers to support these events. In the last year, staff coordinated 22 events, including Hometown Days and Art and Wine Fair for the first time, recruited over 400 volunteers for the events, transitioned the operations of the farmers market to a contract provider, and increased our social media presence and specifically engagement by over 800% on Instagram and nearly 75% on Facebook. Our goals for the upcoming year for events include expanding our knowledge and implementation of sustainable event practices and to increase in community engagement and participation of our events. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And I think Stephen's next.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. Stephen Machida, Public Works Director. Actually, before I start my presentation, I would like to actually compliment the City Council members for you providing the guidance to what you're going to hear of our budget for this coming year. I think in my 40-plus years of experience of doing this kind of work, I don't think I've ever put together this kind of budget in this magnitude, and certainly it's through your leadership, your foresight, in your strategic plan that you are really positioning this city for great success in the future. So with that, I'd like to kind of present Public Works. As I mentioned, Steve Machida, Public Works Director. This is my org chart. As you can see, there's quite a few people on my staff, and so, but just really quickly break down. I have 3 administrative staff, or 3 staff in administration. I have 10 staff in engineering. That is overseen by the city engineer, Grace Lee, and 24 staff members overseen by our maintenance staff members overseen by our Public Works Superintendent, Lou Duran, for a total of 37 employees. Real quickly, this is some of the things that the administration staff does. We oversee all the capital improvement projects as well as engineering, look at all the land development projects that come in, any kind of permitting that's going to be required, our traffic engineering, our utilities and operations as it relates to engineering and operations and safety, as well as various programs throughout the community, which includes parking, our sidewalk program, and our parklet program. Some of the accomplishments that we completed this year included the kind of sidewalk repair program. We always strive to actually reduce our sanitary sewer overflows, or commonly known as SSOs. Since this time, we actually have continued to remove the 36 eucalyptus trees along San Carlos Avenue. Just as a reminder, we kind of removed approximately 74 eucalyptus trees during the 3 phases. And then we are currently updated our current 5-year paving master plan, which you're going to hear a little bit more about in this presentation. So some of the goals, as I mentioned earlier, is we really do have a robust program to repave our streets, look at our infrastructure, namely sanitary sewer and storm drain, and then complete a lot of our maintenance CIP priorities. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we will be completing the San Carlos Pedestrian Safety Project, Phase 3, this coming year. And then we're really going to focus on a lot of our pedestrian and bicycle accessibility and safety programs that the council has talked to me about. And then we also wanted to work with our partners to improve some of the school traffic issues and some of the solutions that we think will be necessary, as well as implementing the neighborhood traffic management program. So the next division is facilities management. So basically, the facility management group manages all city facilities, and they respond to any of the service called out from our staff, the stakeholders, or the public. Some of the accomplishments they made, they completed the internal painting of the Wheeler Plaza garage with anti-graffiti coating, and they created a pest control program in the downtown as well as in our facilities. The goals for next year are they want to paint the library next year, and then complete the security camera upgrades in all city facilities, as well as install kind of the additional lighting in Wheeler Garage, where perhaps painting really didn't lighten up the darker areas in the corners of the garage itself. Next division is the fleet management. So this is comprised of a single person, but basically this person manages our vehicle equipment and maintenance and purchasing of all our vehicles. They operate our fuel station and dispose of all city vehicles and equipment. The accomplishment they did last year is to really develop a EV infrastructure plan, because we ultimately will have to transition our internal combustion engines to more of an EV platform. We're also looking to convert our small engine equipment over from internal combustions to more battery powered. And then he continues to spec and submit purchase requests for all other city vehicles. And again, mentioned he is responsible for the fuel station certification in the yard. Some of the goals is really to purchase a street patch truck, and this is kind of will assist in a lot of our minor street repairs as well as pothole patching. And then he is responsible for a lot of our training within the corp yard, mainly the aerial lift that we're going to recently purchase, as well as any hazmat and safety training within the corporation yard. So the parks maintenance is the next division that we'll talk about. Is they maintain all our city parks, whether they're developed parks or open space parks. So that includes playgrounds, medians, hiking trails, athletic fields, and courts. In spite of all the rain that we had recently in the earlier part of the year, we still want to maintain our water conservation plan, so they are responsible to ensure that the plan moves forward. Some of the accomplishments that we have are they still want to maintain the ongoing fire prevention maintenance in a lot of the open space areas. As you probably have all seen, we typically use a lot of the livestock or goats to kind of control a lot of the weeds within the open space. We've installed concrete pads and benches in the Burton Park and completed a lot of sports field lighting projects at Burton and Highland. The goals for next year is to replace some of the benches at Loyola Park and replace the track at Arguello Park, as well as reconstruct some of the walking paths on Highlands Park. Wastewater overview. So this is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, but basically we need to manage all the sanitary sewer system as well as laterals, any of the sewer collection systems, and all the pump station lift stations within our collection system. We are also responsible to respond to all emergencies and requests, whether it's from the public, residents, or within Silicon Valley Clean Water. Our accomplishment is continuing to reduce our sanitary sewer overflows, or SSOs, and then replace and repair all our sanitary sewer mains and replace any defective laterals, and then continue to kind of do the annual maintenance, which would include cleaning as well as root foaming to remove the roots out of the mains themselves. The goals, again, as always, is we continue to replace all our sewer mains and laterals and then with the goal of reducing SSOs, and then upgrade our pump station and wet wells. So stormwater, as we all experienced this past January, we saw a lot of storm, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But some of the work that we still need to do is, and then we continue to do, is to monitor and maintain our storm drains. And then review our levee maintenance program, as well as do any kind of repair work, and then kind of work locally with some of our neighbors, as well as One Shoreline, to look at more or less kind of the creek monitoring and to ensure high level flows. And then implemented the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES permit requirements, and this typically is for the treatment of surface runoff, so essentially rainwater runoff on the streets, to make sure that it gets treated and it just doesn't go directly into the bay. Our accomplishments included we cleaned over 250 trash capture devices, which is a kind of state mandate, and we clean those 3 times a year. We provided responsive action during this kind of the recent storm, but basically we responded to all kinds of requests on any time during as it relates to storm water, or for that matter, any of thing that we are responsible for. And they assisted this engineering department with kind of helping cover some of the landslide. I believe we had about 11 landslide as a result of the kind of storms that we had this past January. Some of the goals for this coming year is continue to repair the landslide. As you can probably imagine, you've probably seen a lot of our landslides have been tarped. We were hoping to remove some of the tarps to actually start doing some of the repair, but unfortunately, because of the rain this week, the tarps remained in place. And then lastly, we have our street maintenance. So this is another division that, basically we're going to talk a lot about today. But basically, they manage and manage all the retaining wall and street maintenance and repair of our streets. They maintain, besides the streets, they maintain our street lights, as well as traffic signals, signs, and street markings on the pavement. The accomplishment is they actually completed a lot of the minor road repairs that we actually, they can do in-house rather than actually having to go out to actually a contractor. And then they also maintain all our traffic signs citywide, as well as help update our current 5-year paving plan. Some of the goals for next year is they want to complete the minor road repairs, or continue to complete minor repairs. That would include some of the potholes, and then continue to maintain the city traffic signs, as well as work on some of their local CIP projects. And that concludes my presentation, so I'll turn this over to Chief Bell.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, Chief Bell.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. I'm Christina Bell, your Chief of Police for the City of San Carlos. So our mission is to work in partnership with the community and other city departments to improve the quality of life of all of our community members and business owners. This is accomplished by the apprehension of violent criminals, crime prevention strategies, recognition, intervention, and resolution of systematic problems within the community, and engagement with youth of our community. So we have 29 employees from the Sheriff's Office, 1 captain, 5 sergeants, 14 deputies, 1 management analyst, 1 records technician, and 7 CSOs. We have 2 dedicated traffic deputies who are motors who work a 410 Monday through Friday. We have a dedicated school resource officer that covers San Carlos and also Millbrae, but has a great relationship with the school district. We have access to the Sheriff's Activities League, our community engagement unit, and we also have many volunteers within the Sheriff's Office that come patrol the streets of San Carlos and help with special events. We also have access to many Sheriff's Office resources, which includes a large detective bureau, task forces, SWAT team, K-9, I could go on. And lastly, we have our public safety communication dispatchers. So our accomplishments in 22-23. The Sheriff's Office secured $300,000 in grant funding from the state of California's Office of Traffic Safety. We call it OTS. So this is for all the Sheriff's Office, split between contract cities for saturation patrols, DUI checkpoints, and other OTS campaigns. Like the month of April was with the cell phone, Distracted Driving Awareness Month. The City of San Carlos hosted the Anonymous Gun Buyback event in December of 2022, where we had 288 firearms that were collected. It was a rainy day, so we had a lower outcome than we thought, but we did have 6 assault weapons and 18 ghost guns turned over. We also conducted multiple traffic enforcement operations, which included bicycle and pedestrian safety, and 94% of our deputies assigned to San Carlos, including the sergeants, are enhanced crisis intervention trained. So the rest will be trained by the end of this year. And this type of training just doesn't apply to crisis calls for service, but it also has a huge impact on all calls for service that we handle. And another accomplishment that we did increase our traffic and parking citations this last year. Looking ahead for our goals is to research, which we've already done, but upgrade the current ALPR system, decrease crime by using intelligence-led policing software, increase data-driven traffic saturation and DUI education enforcement, and this is based on our traffic collision data, which is compromised of our motor units pull every collision, map it, and then that's how they focus their enforcement. And we would like to issue 6,000, I think they can get more, but 6,000 parking citations and continue to provide excellent service to the City of San Carlos residents. So this concludes my presentation. Next up is our true heroes at the fire department.
Thank you, Chief Bell. All right, Chief Pucci.
She had to get one last dig in. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. Dave Pucci, Deputy Fire Chief, and I'm going to present to you your fire services. So the main services that we provide to you include fire suppression, which is exactly what you would think it would be, emergency medical services, which is paramedic level services on all of our apparatus in San Carlos, fire prevention, which isn't just about plan check, but it includes inspections of buildings, residences, structures, schools, plan review, as well as wildland urban interface inspections, which happen every year. So it's pretty widely encompassing. We have public safety, public assist calls, which can be anything from replacing a battery in somebody's smoke detector to when there's a water incident inside somebody's home that would actually help them remove the water, those kinds of things. Rescue response really is whatever you can imagine. It could be a trench rescue, high-angle rescue. We have those rescue capabilities as well. One of our big victories that I'll highlight a little bit later is the growth of our community emergency response plan. Our participation in that group that is really thriving right now, and we're very gratified by that. And then public education, which includes school visits, city events, and everything that you see the fire engines at with the community interacting with our firefighters. So our accomplishments last year is we're consistently holding 2 CERT classes per year. We're finding that typical enrollment for those classes is in the 30 range. We've graduated about, well, actually, the enrollment always starts greater, about 45 people that enroll, about 30 people complete the program. And what we're able to do is, as we're getting more graduates from the program, is we're developing leadership within the CERT groups. So they are actually self-sustaining in the neighborhoods, as well as sometimes they put on their own classes within their neighborhoods, which is really great to see. We are almost complete with updating the city emergency operations plan, working with the city manager's office, so we'll be speaking about that very soon. And the interesting thing about this emergency operations plan, it was really in partnership with the city of Redwood City, trying to make sure that our emergency plans mirror each other, because for the storms in January, we really had a two-city approach to those storms, as we reported earlier, and having the plans in alignment with each other is going to be really helpful for future efforts. Another big victory for us is we did get what's called a SAFER grant to actually be able to increase the total department size by 6 firefighters. That is going to be 100% federally funded, and those firefighters will go online and help offset some of the overtime costs that we are trying to control. And lastly, we're doing the interviews for this week. We have a new classification called firefighter trainee to make sure that those members of the community that may not have the means to be able to put themselves through the school and requirements that we used to require, those requirements have dropped, and we have a much more diverse applicant pool that are able to be interviewed to join the fire service. Another of our accomplishments is we really had a good experiences reported earlier on the storm response, and I think the two-city approach is going to be really beneficial for both of us going forward, whether it's a storm or earthquake or wildfire. Unfortunately, from the emergency management point of view, I hope that this is the last slide I have to put COVID-19 on there, but we're not quite done with that in the emergency management world. We still have some after-action review to do, so we'll continue to do that. We're going to be providing some more emergency management training in partnership with the city of Redwood City, so the two cities can be mutually supportive of each other going forward. Working closely with the Parks Department and Public Works, we're going to continue to look for targets of opportunity when it comes to wildfire fuel mitigation efforts that will be going on forever. And then we'll continue to provide 2 CERT classes. Really, the biggest class is actually going on right now, but we had 55 people that actually signed up for that. And I'm not sure if this is going to work, but this is actually a picture of Station 16. Is that able to play? It might not. It might be just a picture. It was a short video. I apologize. I thought it was going to be able to be played, but it was the demolition of Station 16, and we'll start seeing quick progress of that building going up pretty soon. Up there it goes. When you look at this, you kind of wonder what was holding the building together prior to this. So that was a big step for us. So we're really glad to be well underway on that project. So, yeah, exactly. And that concludes my section. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Chief Pucci. All right. I think that is all the department presentations. So at this point, we will move on to any council questions from the presentations. So I'll give my colleagues a second to think about that. And again, thank you for all the presentations, and certainly was a successful year and lots to come. Are there any questions? And welcome, Councilmember Venkatesh.
Thank you. I have a voice back.
All right. That's good. Councilmember Collins doesn't have to read your questions anymore.
She may have to read mine.
All right. I am not seeing any questions at all. Oh, all right. Councilmember McDowell.
I was waiting. I was deferring to my colleagues. Thanks, everyone, for the great presentations. I had a quick follow-up question for Chief Pucci, actually. I'm very interested in the CERT trainings, and you said you had your biggest class ever. So could you just talk a little bit maybe about recruiting and certain things that you maybe implemented to get people back interested in the program?
You know, it was really about, during COVID, our ability to actually host CERT classes dropped off just because of the health restrictions going forward. And so the program kind of just sat there for a little while, and we weren't able to do that in-person training. So the interest really took off pretty quickly in the beginning. And I have to give credit to Lee Bach. She's the consultant that we hired to assist us with growing this program. She retired from Foster City. She's in a consulting role now with us, and she ran the CERT program there, so she's very enthusiastic. And when the community has confidence in the program, the people leading it, they are attracted to that. So as the numbers begin, then the word starts to get out, and it's really growing by itself now. It's kind of hit that critical mass. We also advertise it in both cities when the classes are coming forward, and it provides all the students that we're capable of handling right now.
That's great to know. Thank you. I just wanted to put on your radar that Millbrae is offering adult mental health first aid training to their CERT classes. So just wanted to put it on your radar as something that could perhaps be considered going forward.
That's great. And there's our next class that the CERT is getting trained on is shelter operations. So if we were to have a disaster and have to open up a shelter, those community members be available to us to actually and be trained on how to actually run a shelter. So as we are able to grow the numbers and provide a variety of classes like that, so that's a great idea.
Great, thank you.
Okay. I had a question for the Assistant City Manager. And just sort of a follow, and maybe a thought, but a question on this. You talked about in your presentation a little bit about sort of updates to the websites and different things. And when I noticed, and maybe I may have missed this when you talked about this, having different videos in there. Is that, I mean, I'm just wondering, is that something that we are thinking about or could use as a tool? We've got some great development projects coming up, other things. Are there pre-recorded videos we can do? I'll say, for example, we at the Council of Cities meeting, Al and his team had made some great presentations about kind of what we're looking at and potentially, like, I'm just wondering if we could maybe have some embedded videos that some staff can record for residents to watch, to be able to say, hey, how do I get updated on what's going on with the Northeast Plan? Here's Megan giving a presentation on that.
That's a great idea, actually, and video is proven to be very popular, and we actually just finished an RFP looking at various video providers that can help us. There are the polished videos that we can include on certain topics for community engagement, and then there are other things we can do that are maybe a little less polished. And the idea was originally came from the concept of the Citizens Academy and thinking, maybe 9 weeks is too long of an initiative for a lot of families, and how can we condense this, and what more can we do to make it more engaging? And we thought maybe we can disseminate a lot of information with video and embedding it in our new website, and then leaving the face-to-face interaction time for more engaging initiatives and projects. So we're definitely looking into video and trying to incorporate it more.
And hopefully we have like a welcome video from the city manager on that, because I know he likes to be in front of the camera.
Or the mayor.
Oh. All right, thank you now. Vice Mayor Dugan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just want to join my colleagues to thank, in general, Jeff and Rebecca and all the departments for the sound financial planning over 15 plus years, actually, that have put us in very good stead. And it's just nice to see the foundation we have, and so the natural extensions of spending that I've seen on the operational side all look prudent and wise, and I appreciate everyone's good thinking on that. And I look forward to discussing the capital spend, which I personally find more enjoyable. So thank you.
All right, I don't see any other questions. Crystal, how about, is there any public comment on this item?
There are no hands from Zoom, and if anyone in person wants to make a public comment, now's the time to raise your hand. Looks like none. Thank you.
Okay, great. And then we'll move on to any council discussion on this topic. I don't see anything. I know we're going to have lots of discussion on the next two items. Okay, so it's 2:28. I was going to propose we take a short break for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then we'll reconvene for the next item. 5, 10, what do people want? 10. Okay, we'll do 10 minutes. We'll return at 2:38. So.
There's some snacks in the enterprise room, or collaboration room, sorry.
Okay, let us resume the meeting. We're going to move on to item 5B, which is an overview of the operating budget, and that is going to be Rebecca Mendenhall, Administrative Services Director.
I'm just going to make a quick opening comment before we turn it over to Rebecca. I just wanted to point out, I know the council's aware of this already, but for the sake of the public, I just wanted to let them know as we get into talking about the budget recommendations that we have had one change in what was presented in the staff reports originally that went out. We're not going to be recommending any additional changes to the fire budget this year, after a conversation that I had earlier this week with the city manager of Redwood City, where she requested that we not consider changes at this time and rather wait until after we're in the process of getting ready to negotiate a new contract, until after we're at least into that process with them. So that's what we've done. We've removed those recommendations from the presentation today, and we'll just be going forward with we're just recommending the status quo plus cost of living adjustment for the existing contract, and then we'll come back to you in the future with some additional changes likely.
Mr. Mayor, I have an announcement to make as well. On the operating budget, I am going to recuse myself because some aspects of the changes to the operating budget might change my status with the city.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. Give you a second to leave. Okay.
Director? Or am I on? Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. So we're going to talk about the two-year operating budget. So as part of the budget process, staff compiles what we established the base, which is incorporating all of the changes that you've made throughout the fiscal year. And we do salary and benefit projections, and all that's incorporated. And we determine if we have a surplus of our deficit. And then we have all the departments consider any program ads or submit program ads to expand programs or to meet mandates or community desires. And so once we have all that information in there, we present to you the proposals. And so the slides that follow will discuss any of those operating program changes for the general fund. So in the City Council's budget, there are two suggestions. The first is to increase the grant funding for the Community Foundation. The city currently provides $40,000 a year to the foundation. Increasing this to $60,000 in both fiscal years will help them increase their annual grant giving program. And then secondly, continuing the funding for the Eucalyptus neighborhood holiday displays. They may think they're Hollywood, but that's a joke. So for the past 2 years, we were funding security guards, portable toilets, and traffic control for the neighborhood to provide safety and security for that month-long event. So that was a pilot program, so this request would be to continue that program at a lower budgeted rate. So in the city manager's budget, there is a request to upgrade the communications coordinator to the management analyst. In the last budget, you approved a communications coordinator position. However, there's been an increased demand for communication both in volume and scope to meet the council's objectives. And it's also become apparent that the communications coordinator doesn't adequately represent the scope and the need of that role. So upgrading this position would cost $43,850 in next fiscal year and $45,550 in '25. The city attorney position has been a contracted part-time position for many years. The need for legal services has increased dramatically over this time, and staff is frequently competing with other agencies and JPAs for the city attorney's time. Converting this position to an in-house full-time attorney would provide staff streamlined and timely access to legal services and advice. The cost to convert the position would be offset by hourly rate savings for work performed that he does outside the retainer, and that's been averaging about $12,000 a month. So this request would be a net increase of $86,800 in '24 and $94,800 in '25. Bringing the legal services in-house will also require a new position of legal secretary to support the full-time attorney. That would require an operating budget, and since these costs are currently shared through the firm that we contract the attorney through, so the total cost to add this administrative support would be $211,850 in '24 and $219,250 in '25. In the city clerk's budget, there's a request to upgrade the administrative assistant to a deputy city clerk. The duties and responsibilities of that role have evolved and expanded over time, from basic clerical functions to requiring knowledge of pertinent government organizations, functions, policies, rules, and regulations. And reclassifying the position would also provide support to council meetings in the city clerk's absence. So this would cost $8,500 next year and $8,800 in the year after. In administrative services, we're requesting a full-time accountant technician position. Over the past 2 years, there's been a 34% increase in vendor payments and 15% increase in cash receipts, and existing staff is having a difficult time keeping up with the increase in transactions. In addition, recent turnover has made it difficult to provide coverage and provide consistency in service. An additional position will provide more flexibility in managing the workload. And the cost for that is $144,500 in fiscal year '24 and $149,700 in fiscal year '25. In the Community Development Department, there's a request to upgrade the senior building inspector to an assistant building official. This reclassified position would allow us to assume a lead role with large-scale development projects and electronic plan review. The upgraded position would also assist in the training and coordination of field inspections and mentoring of division staff. Upgrading this position would cost $29,900 in fiscal year '24 and $30,600 in fiscal year '25. In Parks and Rec, increases in our athletics programs in the participation is requiring additional funding for part-time salaries and instructors to support those programs. Increasing salaries and support will give us ability to offer more programs, resulting in a net revenue to the general fund of $57,000 in '24 and $58,700 in '25. Also in Parks and Rec, there's 2 additional requests. The first is to increase the funding for special events. The cost to coordinate these events has increased substantially from the years prior to COVID. Items such as glassware, rentals, in entertainment, shuttle services, and supplies have gone up dramatically. So additional funding is needed to continue to support the high-quality events that the community desires. The total cost is $37,500 in fiscal year '24 and $42,725 in fiscal year '25. In addition, this past year, the council approved funding for a volunteer recognition dinner. This request would be to create a budget to support an employee appreciation dinner to contribute to positive employee morale. The costs are $30,000 in fiscal year '24 and $30,900 in fiscal year '25. In the police services budget, There's a request to increase the budget to cover the proposed costs from the sheriff's office. Each year, in conjunction with the budget, the council will consider an amendment to the cost of services of the agreement. There's several reasons this is going up, including wage increases, the elimination of the investigative services credit we used to receive, and a reduction in our unfunded liabilities. However, another portion of this increase is related to the operating costs or overhead allocations that are pass-through costs from the county. If the actual costs are lower than contracted, the prior year savings is kept in a trust account. So it's recommended to use $350,000 of this prior year savings to bring the cost down for fiscal year '24 for a net of additional funding needed of $523,000. In next year, if there's trust fund savings from this current year, we can look to apply those to fiscal year '25. In the Public Works Department, staff is requesting annual funding to implement recommended tree care following the tree assessment project. The assessment found that over 250 trees are in poor, critical, or dead condition, so annual funding would provide a proactive approach to maintaining these trees. Also in Public Works, there's a request to increase the funding for crossing guards. In fiscal year 2022, the council agreed to fully fund this program, which supports 11 different sites from 3 to 4 hours a day. This year, the costs have increased 11%, so the additional funding of $20,000 in '24, and we're estimating $25,000 in '25, is required to fully fund this program. Staff is also requesting 2 reclassifications, the first being the mechanic to the senior mechanic position. Over time, the management of the fleet has become more complex as we transition from internal combustion engines to an EV platform. The senior position will also manage outside mechanics and specialty contractors. There's a very small cost to upgrade this position because we've been surveyed against similar positions already in the county. And finally, staff's also requesting a reclassification of the senior engineer position to a principal engineer position. With the number of capital projects increasing in both scope and complexity, reclassifying this position will provide staff more assistance with the management of the projects and public outreach. There is no cost to upgrade this. This is a title change only. So the total operating funding requests for the general fund total $1.3 million in fiscal year '24 and $1.8 million in fiscal year '25. These requests have been included in the proposed budget that I'll be covering next. So on top of the operating, which are annual operating costs, we do have a recommendation to do another one-time payment to CalPERS. As I mentioned earlier, the one-time payments that we've done have dramatically reduced our net pension liabilities, and we do have a $3 million unfunded pension reserve that we can use to pay down more unfunded liabilities. And that reserve was created from prior year surpluses or savings, which are typically generated from salary and benefit savings. Right now, the reserve is earning less than 3% interest. So if we were to take the payment and apply it against our CalPERS, it would be given like a 6.5% interest rate yield, and we would eliminate $4.7 million to $6.2 million in future pension payments, which on average is about $300,000 in savings a year. So if council approves this item moving forward in the budget, a separate item would come forward with additional details about this request in after the summer recess. So looking at our fiscal year 23-24 revenue assumptions, the general fund revenue is budgeted at $55.34 million, which is an increase of 7.2% from the existing budget. So a few highlights of these increases include we're budgeting to increase our business registration by 19%. And again, that's based on the fact that we have an outside provider now that can collect more, and we're bringing in more cash. So it's resetting the budget to a more normalized rate. Our charges for current services is budgeted to increase 6.4%, and this is due to the expansion of the Parks and Rec programming that we've requested and special event revenues, as well as the timing of plan check services related to development. Licenses and permits is estimated to increase 4%, and this is based again on the projected timing of development project permits, and as well as the permit cost increases that council approved at the last budget as part of the user fees. Property tax is estimated to increase 8.8%, and again, this is based on our general assessment rolls. As I mentioned earlier, property tax is a stable line of income, and so as those assessment rolls keep going up, so does our revenue. Sales tax is estimated to go up 8.5%, and again, we're looking at our projections based on the steady building materials, and the plumbing, electrical, and contractor sales activity has continued to drive this revenue stream up. Our TOT, we're expecting to increase as we're expecting the pre-pandemic occupancy rates to start to grow again as more people are traveling for business. Other uses of money and property includes rentals and investment income. And this is showing a decrease, but that's mainly because we're looking to invest our reserves into our capital projects. So the money that we have sitting in the investment accounts is going to go down, so our investment income is going to go down, while our spending goes up in other areas. And vehicle in lieu, we're expecting an increase of 9.9%. That's based on what the county is telling us. We do have a factor in there in case we do have the county is unable to backfill the total amount, so we are discounting it a little bit, so we feel pretty comfortable with those numbers. And our fiscal year 24-25 revenue assumptions do include an increase of 4.6% from 23-24, and that's based on projected run rates. We'll also review all of the 24-25 projections as part of our mid-cycle review next year. So this chart reflects the total revenues for both fiscal years. As you can see, property and sales tax represent 56% of our total budgeted revenue. Moving to the expenditures, the total general fund revenue expenditure is increasing 6.8% from our current revised budget. And this includes all the position requests and the program changes that I just discussed. Salaries and benefits have been funded at 100% based on all current known MOUs. This includes our legacy obligations or our obligations for CalPERS with our former Belmont San Carlos Fire Department, as well as our former police department. The operating expenditures have increased 7.7%. Again, that includes some of the program changes as well as professional services increasing for known contract arrangements and anticipated needs. And finally, capital outlay is increasing by 4% as based on an inflationary factor. So this chart represents the total proposed expenditures by department. As you can see, public safety represents 43% of our total. So I've covered revenues and expenses. There's another piece to the puzzle that helps us balance everything, and that's our transfers, or our net allocations and transfers. So you can see this chart. The recommended budget results in an unrestricted fund balance in fiscal year 23-24 of approximately $1 million. And these balances are projections, so savings achieved throughout this year will increase these balances accordingly. And as you can see, as done in prior years, there is a recommendation to transfer the capital reserves. So you can see there's 7.85, and that's going to be transferred next year into the capital funds to, again, help fund all those capital projects we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So the wastewater or the sewer fund, we have talked about this, that the revenue can only be used to fund sewer-related projects. What's important to note, and I think we've said it a few times, but it doesn't hurt to say it again, is that the revenue projected here does not reflect a sewer rate increase for the next fiscal years. So we're looking to forego a sewer rate increase or take a rate holiday next year. Similar to the general fund, salaries and benefits are budgeted based on all known MOU provisions. This also includes Silicon Valley Clean Water plant operations and any of the bond payments that they pass through from Silicon Valley Clean Water. That information comes directly from their long-range financial plan and the budget that they approve, so we know those numbers are pretty solid. And then capital projects will be discussed in a few minutes. The other revenue funds, these are revenue sources for which expenditures are restricted by law or administrative action. This includes the NPDS fund, police grants fund, and I've included the library tenant fund in here. The table here shows the current year's revised budget and projection as well as the proposed budget for the other funds. As you can see, if you look at it, Fund 25 or fiscal year 24-25, we are showing to decrease this total fund balance as a result of the closure of the library tenant fund. We would use that money to help pay off the debt obligation a year early. So right now our debt service is scheduled to be exhausted in fiscal year 26. But one of the recommendations is, as part of the city's centennial, is to pay it off in fiscal year 25, so a year early. So, moving to the other program funds, these are our internal service funds. So workers' comp, general liability, and post-employment benefits. One of the things I want to bring to your attention here is the expenses are increasing, the insurance expenses in particular are increasing. Even though we're part of a JPA, our rates are still going up 3% as compared to our general liability are going up 3% as compared to the rest of the JPA, which is going up in total of 11%. And then our property insurance rates are going up 33% or 38%, but in total, everyone's property insurance rates are going up about 40%. So insurance is definitely driving the expenses in this area. So with that, I'll move to the general fund reserve balances. So the Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA, issued its best practice in determining the appropriate level of unrestricted fund balance. And it should be at a minimum of no less than 2 months of regular general fund operating expenses, which equates to about 17%. So you can see that we keep our economic uncertainty reserve at 17%, but then we have other reserves. And these reserves are either assigned balances, which the city manager can assign at the end of the fiscal year, depending on any savings that we have, as well as the committed fund balance for strategic property acquisition reserve. So as you'll see, the facilities infrastructure reserve is starting to get depleted because we're taking that money and we're transferring it into capital where we can make a difference with it. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the departments are here as well if you have any specific questions regarding their requests.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. So yes, we'll go with council questions, then public comment, and then any council discussion on this item. So first, let's see if there's any council questions on this. Councilmember McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question, I think, is for, well, maybe for Crystal or Rebecca. Could you just talk about the deputy city clerk, and would that person be able to preside over meetings if Crystal were not able to be here?
Yes, that's one of the huge benefits, that in case I'm ill, this person would be able to step in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilmember Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Rebecca. Just a couple. On the unfunded pension liabilities, at the beginning of the meeting, when you showed us that graph, it looked like they peaked about 6 or 7 years ago, and they've been dramatically decreasing since then. Is there a point at which they get to, low enough that we say, we're going to just pay it off? I mean, have you ever thought about what that number might be and how much in the future that might be given the rate at which we are continuing to make these additional payments?
That would be in the year 2045.
Still, okay. I know it's a big number, but it used to be like, what, $50 million, and now it's under, what, 25, something like that?
Well, yeah, and you know, there's a lot of things that go into the unfunded liability calculation. So every year, it's not just determined by how much we pay down, but it's also determined on how much CalPERS is earning.
Right.
And so last year they had losses, so that impacts the next actuarial, which is actually coming up this fiscal year. So that's why I wanted to wait until next fiscal year to see what our actuarial is, to see how the $3 million could best be applied.
So it's not like a mortgage where you have a fixed interest rate and you know at some point you're just going to,
No,
it's
it
going to
keeps
reach
changing.
a crossover point. We all wish.
Yeah, it keeps changing on us.
Right. Second question was, I noticed that we're after a dip in TOT for this year, there's a projected increase. Is there a metric that you use to calculate what you think the increased revenues will be?
So this next fiscal year, we're anticipating the opening of the hotel, what's the name of it?
Hyatt Place?
Hyatt Place, yes. So that has been out of all of our numbers up until this point. So we're anticipating that it will open before the next fiscal year. So we'll have a full year of revenues from there.
All right. So it's not simply anticipating a recovery for, say, the other hotels, Residence Inn, and that sort of thing.
That's included in there as well, but most of it's related to opening the new hotel.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Vice Mayor Dugan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Rebecca, yeah, for you, follow-up question on the pension buy-down. So you're proposing $3 million this year. And just so I kind of get high level, why do we want to do that? I think I heard you say paying it early basically is like getting a 6% return on that money, where if it sits on our balance sheet, we're getting what, like 1% to 2% or something? Is that
Less than 3, yeah.
a little less than 3?
And
okay.
it reduces our outstanding obligation that CalPERS then recalculates on an annual basis. So bringing that down will save not just our future payments, but annual savings is estimated to be around $300,000 a year.
I see. And so that would even be on top of that 6%, or that's in that 6%?
Yeah.
That's in that. Got it. And then, and the reason we wouldn't want to do that is if we're concerned that, we needed that fund available liquids, for eventualities that we don't foresee. Is that, that's classically why you would keep it on the balance sheet?
Yes, the reserve was set up specifically to take salary savings and pay down these obligations. If we were anticipating something, we wouldn't have to make the payment. We could, put the reserves back into other things.
Got it.
The council has the
Got it, but like if we were having a tight year, then we wouldn't do it, right? Because we would want to make sure we had access to that.
We actually did do one of these payments in a tight year. We did it in COVID, during COVID.
Okay.
Because it's not, you don't typically use your reserves to pay for your operating expenses. So we balanced the operating budget, and we still had this reserve, knowing that if we made this payment, it would reduce our future payments. So our annual payments would come down, which would reduce our annual operating changes, our annual operating costs.
Got it. And then when you think about that 6% versus a little less than 3, do those numbers, are they market-driven at all? I know CalPERS is making market investments.
That's based on their assumption,
Yeah.
which I think is at 6.5%. Is that right? 6.5? I think so. I think it's currently at 6.5. They've been making a lot of changes to their assumption and their risks. So it used to be 7.5%, and they've been bringing it down.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it definitely seems healthy to keep chipping away at that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, my turn. All right, I have a few questions. Let's see. I will start with, I think this will be probably for maybe Stephen or Amy. I don't know who's got the tree replacement and maintenance. I think that's Stephen. Okay. So I think one, I'm happy that we're doing this tree maintenance program. I think it's a good idea, but I think Amy mentioned there's a number of trees that are been deemed to be dead already. So we've got some removal costs, and I'm also curious about sort of replacement in some places. I don't know that we would replace in an open space park, but like in some of the other parks. I didn't see budget for that. Is there a plan to include removal and potential replacement as part of the maintenance, or can we look at adjusting that to meet those needs?
Right. So what's before you is actually just to replace the $150,000 for next year is really actually for replacement. And those are the 250 trees that were identified by that report. Unfortunately, when we actually were preparing a lot of the sheet, we were in the throes, as you probably recall, we were in throes of all the storm, and we were seeing kind of new emergency every day where trees are falling, flood. So by oversight, I think we did not include a component for the tree replacement. It's my understanding we had approximately 50 plus trees actually fall as a result, and these 50 aren't those that were identified in the 250 that the study. So it would be certainly our recommendation to actually include about another $150,000 in this component. For the actual portion of the tree replacement, as well as some of the establishment or providing water to the trees so they actually survive.
Okay, so the overall recommendation would be, you're saying after sort of thinking about this more, we might look at 300,000 for that number to do maintenance, repair, sort of the whole plan around that.
That is, and it's not a kind of an ongoing thing, but it certainly would be kind of one-time.
Sure.
shot.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Stephen. My second question would be for Chris Valley. I like your swag, Chris.
Thank you.
And so I see you've got sort of the upgrade of the position, which I think is great. We've got significant amount of projects coming, both on the commercial side. We've got some big housing developments coming in as well. I'm just concerned and want to make sure that you feel like you're staffed well enough to be able to, do your work and keep that sort of economic development and the housing production development going in the coming years.
Okay, my answer to that is yes. We've just recently hired a building inspector one that is already out in the field, looking at stuff and inspecting things. We're also still in the process of recruiting the permit tech position. So we're still chipping away at that. And I'm confident that we'll fill that within the next, hopefully, 4 to 6 months. So to answer your question, between the consultants that we have reviewing these projects and the current staff that we have, hopefully with the addition of one more, I believe that we are well positioned to address the workload that's coming our way.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
All right.
And then I had one more, but now I don't know. I think that's it for me. I thought I had one more, but I can't find my notes on it. So I'll see if there's any other questions in the meantime while we've gone through. If anyone has any other thoughts or comments. No? All right. This was easy. Oh, okay. But no more questions. Okay. All right. So with that, let's move on to public comment, if there's any public comment on these items, on this item.
There are no hands on Zoom, and I haven't received a public speaker slip in person.
Okay. So with that, I will move to council discussion and comments. Are there, I think Councilmember McDowell said you had a comment?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a couple comments. I really loved our volunteer dinner that Parks and Rec put on this year, so I think that doing something for our employees would be really nice. I hope City Council is invited. And I would love to see us put some thought also into bringing back some of the awards that the Chamber used to give out to the community as that event moves forward and grows. I do support paying down the unfunded liability. I think that the chart that Rebecca showed at the beginning of our meeting today was really illustrative of the benefits of doing that, and I think that's something that our city can be really proud of. I'm happy to pay for crossing guards as usual. Our city is up to paying, I think, $250,000 a year for crossing guards, which I know is really appreciated by our community. I'm also happy to support growing our staff. Crystal, I think getting you a deputy is really great. I don't know why it never dawned on me that you can't ever not come to a meeting. So we need to get you a deputy. You deserve to have time off when you're sick. So I do support that. And it was called out at the beginning of our meeting that some of our savings is because we haven't been able to fill our open staff positions, which just means that our staff is working so much harder to carry a heavier load. So I think that whatever we can do to attract and retain staff, which John Dugan and I sit on that subcommittee together, I think is really important. So I support that. I appreciate the rate holiday for our sewer rates, and I think we could do a really cute social media campaign about taking a rate holiday. I think that people appreciate that in our community, so I think that we should message that. I like the idea of paying off our library debt early. I think that's really smart, as long as we're in a good position to do that. And I also support the mayor's idea for additional money for the tree replacement. So thanks for bringing that up. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McDowell. And I don't see any other comments. I actually remembered my other question now, so that's good. Thank you for speaking for a few minutes. I think one of the big changes in the budget, and I think I think it's good that we sort of explain a little bit around that, is bringing the city attorney in-house and doing that and hiring that. So I think, Jeff, if you could comment a little bit more on that, I just think from the public perspective that would be good. And just to understand also sort of what that gets us and the impact that we're sort of facing and why we sort of come to that decision, given that I think there's been increased workload and we want to make sure that we can still meet the obligations that we have for staff and for council and for the city.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, you know, the sort of the two constituencies that the city attorney serves most directly are the city council. He's your attorney, the attorney of the council, and then of course the city staff. And you know, we know from comments from the council over the last year, and I know from comments from staff over the last year, as we've grown the organization and we've taken on more programs and more projects and more services, right? You've added staff and everything, and we've geared up to do all those things. But what we haven't done, you know, I mean, we really should have thought about this last year, but, you know, sometimes you just take what you have for granted a little bit, and I think that's what we've done here, is we didn't grow the city attorney's budget at all. And, you know, so that's created kind of a choke point in the process. You know, historically, you're really only buying about half of a full-time employee. And so our city attorney serves other cities and other clients, and they have their demands and their meetings and their timelines and their issues that he's dealing with too. So he's not always accessible to us. And, you know, after hearing those comments from the staff and hearing those comments from council and talking with our current city attorney about it and looking at, you know, what some other cities in the area are doing, it seemed like the easiest and the most natural solution would be to bring the city attorney in-house, like the other city employees that we have. It doesn't change the working conditions. The city council is still, you know, the employer of the city attorney and the city manager. Both positions report directly to the council. So nothing in that regard changes. So you'll be getting, you know, by making it a full-time employee, it would, you know, you'd go from buying about 1,200 hours a year to buying about 2,400 hours a year. So it's a significant increase over what we've got now. We'll still in the future work with special attorneys on special projects like we do now. You know, Greg is a great generalist city attorney, but he's not necessarily an expert in all areas. So when we do special projects, you know, sometimes special complex land use projects, or we're dealing with a specialized labor relations issue, or when we do special projects to the city council, like when we did the big change to gun regulations in the community, we'll look to make sure that we're still augmenting his services with special legalized services when there's we see that as an advantage to us. So is that a good overview for you?
That's great.
All right.
That answers my question. Thank you, Jeff. I know Councilmember Collins had a comment following that.
Well, I was going to ask Jeff to talk about what happens when Greg is recused and that sort of thing. And he and I had this discussion the other day, and I wanted him to repeat it again for the benefit of the public. But in your answer to Adam's question, I think you covered that we are well-served even when we have special situations and when Greg can't represent us for any particular reason. So
That's right. It would work exactly the same, because it's not, in those instances where the city attorney has to recuse himself, it's not just in this meeting, right? It's the whole project that person has to be recused from. So we would just continue to handle it the same way.
I think we're lucky to have him, and now we get him full-time. He's all ours. So I'm very supportive of that.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Collins. I just want to just also indicate it I like the idea of paying down the unfunded liability. I think that's and I do think we will obviously have a discussion about which approach makes the most sense when that item comes back for us. And I do support paying the bond off a year earlier. I think that would be a smart move as well. So are there any other comments? No? Okay. Perfect. So I think that's it for that item. Let's move on to item 5C, which is discussion of recommended capital improvement programs for the fiscal years 2023 to 2028. I think this is Rebecca. This is like the Rebecca show today.
Good afternoon again. If I'm talking too fast, please let me know.
You're doing a great job.
Okay. All right. Well, this is what everyone has been waiting for. So this is our 5-year capital improvement program. As you can see, we have budgeted over the next 5 years $187 million. And it will fund the following project categories. As you can see, there's a significant amount of funding proposed for our sewer and our streets and our sidewalks. And I know when I first started with the city about 18 years ago, our CIP was very small, so this is a huge increase over where we have been in the past. So as shown here, these capital projects are funded from multiple funds. I'll discuss each of these funds in more detail during the presentation, but I'm only going to focus on the projects that are new or have amendments to them. There's a whole bunch of projects that you have already approved that are already in the process, and additional detail on all of these projects can be found in your packet beginning on page 152. So we'll start with the wastewater fund. As you can see, over the next 5 years, we're proposing an investment of $54.6 million into our wastewater system. Over the past 5 years, we've only spent 17.7. So you can see that this is a huge increase. And again, talking about the rate holiday, we're able to do this without increasing sewer rates next year. So this is a big deal. So I'll highlight a few of these projects in a moment, but this is a list of what those annual projects are and the funding requested over the next 5 years. And then these are the new projects that we're requesting. So I'm just going to highlight a few of these a little more. So our annual sewer system rehabilitation accounts for the repair, rehabilitation, and replacement of structural deficiencies. The annual rehab project has steadily addressed grade 4 and 5 defects, as well as replaced additional lower laterals. So included in this budget is a proposal of $35 million over the next 5 years, or $7 million a year. So funding of $150,000 has been proposed in next year's budget to perform a sewer and storm pump station assessment. This assessment will assist in evaluating the storage of waste and stormwater, the condition of the pumps, the improvements to electrical panels, and services to improve efficiency. The pump stations are crucial to collect, store, and lift waste and stormwater, and failures can cause sewer overflows or flooding in the streets. Assessing these improvements will also reduce the cost of preventative maintenance and staff time to constantly repair these failing places. Funding of $300,000 has been proposed in fiscal year '24 for a sewer model update. The model update will allow staff to plan for future infrastructure improvements, maintenance strategies, and identify any capacity issues, improving the overall safety of the sanitary sewer system. Funding of $605,000 has been proposed in fiscal year '24 for the Shoreway Road sewer main relocation project. The existing sewer main can no longer be rehabilitated or repaired due to the severity of defects, which can cause sewer overflows and backups. Existing utilities and permanent structures along the alignment pose difficulty and challenges to perform repairs. Relocating the sewer main will also reduce ongoing preventative maintenance and staff time needed. Funding of $1 million has been proposed in fiscal year '24 for the Tierra Linda pump station improvements. Relocating and replacing this sewer main will reduce the potential for overflows and backups. The existing pump station poses difficulty and challenges to staff because it cannot be fully utilized to lift, transport, and clear wastewater. The two pumps can't be used simultaneously for safety and concern of sewer overflows and backups. And the last sewer project I'll highlight is the Sewer Capacity Improvement Project for $9.5 million. Completing the sewer capacity insurance improvements will reduce the number of sanitary sewer overflows. And funding for this project comes in part from the capacity fees that we collect from developers. So moving to this is the gas tax fund. This is used to account for the money that comes in from the Street and Highways Code section 2106, 2107, and 2107.5. And these revenues must be expended for maintenance and construction related to streets and sidewalks. So we use the gas tax fund to fund our annual streets and annual sidewalk projects. But in addition to the funding of the annual projects, I'll talk about $8 million more of specific sidewalk improvements that are proposed in the general capital fund. But you can see just in the gas tax fund, we're proposing $41 million of street and sidewalk improvements as compared to $17 million over the last 5 years. So these are the annual projects that are included in this fund. So the Payment Condition Index, this is a numerical rating based on the type and severity of distresses observed on the payment surface. The PCI value of the payment condition is represented by a numerical index between 0 and 100, where 0 is the worst possible condition and 100 is the best. Right now, our existing PCI is currently at 57, so it's in an at-risk condition. So PCI index improvements are addressed in our annual street resurfacing project. So spending in the amount of $39 million over the next 5 years is proposed to raise our PCI from its current level of 57 or at risk to 62 or fair condition. So in addition to gas tax funds, this project is also funded with $8.5 million from our facility infrastructure reserve that I talked about in the general fund. So over the last 5 years, we've spent a total of $406,000 toward the traffic marking and striping project. Over the next 5 years, it's proposed to increase this to $300,000 annually for a total of $1.5 million. This work is done in conjunction with the annual resurfacing project and includes striping, signage, and/or marking changes initiated by staff, suggested by the public, or approved by the Planning and Transportation Committee. Additionally, the Safe Routes to School plan has identified specific intersections and streets where traffic striping and pavement marking improvements can be made. So over the past 5 years, we've budgeted $120 per year for our annual sidewalk program. The proposed budget includes increasing this funding to $300,000 next year and $180,000 annually thereafter. So these are the sidewalk repair projects that we do annually, and then we bill the property owners for their portion of the work. This sidewalk program has continued to grow as more property owners are participating. And also included in this is a partial funding of a sidewalk master plan. Okay, so that moves us to the General Capital Fund, and this is, you may hear us talk about it as Fund 25. This fund generally does not have restrictions on how we can use the money, so we use it to fund a number of projects, and they can range from park and rec projects to technology, to facilities, to infrastructure, to planning projects. There's a whole number of things that we use this for. The primary sources of funding are ERAF rebates, the franchise fees from the transfer station, traffic impact fees, which are limited to how they can be used, field use fees also limited, but most importantly, this is funded from prior year savings. So as we talked about earlier today, all the prior year savings that's sitting in the facility infrastructure reserve, we move over to this fund to help fund our infrastructure improvements. So the city collects NPDES fees, but those fees are not enough to cover the cost of storm drain repair and improvements. Therefore, the General Capital Fund is used to cover these projects. So previously, we had budgeted $1.5 million for these annual storm drain improvements at the following locations: 3017 Britton, 1000 Drake, 1005 Drake, Eaton Park, and Arguello Park. An additional $4.1 million has been requested over the next 5 years. During the winter storms, the storm drain facilities in these locations were overwhelmed, causing property damage and flood damage. So additional funding is needed to fund the recommended changes. In addition, we had previously budgeted $450,000 for storm channel sediment removal. So staff is now requesting an investment of $1.7 million over the next 5 years. The industrial road area experiences frequent flooding, and that's had a detrimental effect on the economic viability of that area. And so sediment removal will help with the cleanup costs for the city and the private property owners. So in addition to the $41 million that I talked about of streets and sidewalk improvements from the gas tax fund, the General Capital Fund is also funding $8 million in specific sidewalk projects, including the Britton Avenue sidewalk improvements between Rogers Avenue and Sunset Drive, and Arroyo Avenue and Chestnut Street safe routes to school improvements. There are two additional projects related to sidewalks. $1 million was previously budgeted for the Safe Routes to School program at Tamarack, Bell, Elm, Arroyo, Belmont, Cedar, and St. Francis. So we're now requesting an additional $3.5 million over the next 5 years to focus on constructing sidewalks and pathways recommended in the Safe Route to Schools program. Staff's also recommending a new project on San Carlos Avenue called the Pedestrian Safety Improvement Phase 4. In the amount of $1.5 million. Phase 4 will include pavement rehabilitation as well as traffic striping and pavement markings to introduce a new buffered green bike lane from Beverly Drive to the city of Belmont limits. And this will be paid for by the traffic mitigation fee reserve. So there's one project amendment for the traffic and transit category. So previously, there was $2.1 million budgeted for traffic circles and mid-block crossing projects at several intersections. So additional funding of $850,000 has been proposed to continue to provide various traffic calming improvements throughout the city. And the focus next year would be along Alameda de las Pulgas Industrial Road, Crestview Drive, and Morse Boulevard. So although we have a separate fund or a park and lieu fund for park projects, some of these projects are also funded by the General Capital Fund. So included in here is the replacement of existing fencing at Highlands, Burton, Cedar, Loyola, and Arguello parks. Also included in this recreation category is one-time funding that's been set aside for our centennial celebration. The city of San Carlos was incorporated in 1925 and will be turning 100 in 2025. So the celebration will include an expansion of community events to incorporate the centennial, downtown banners, city swag, apparel, and other programs. So staff has requested funding of $450,000 to replace the Madsen scoreboard at Burton Park. There's a picture of it there. It's on the corner of Burton and Cedar. The existing score booth roof leaks, and without significant repairs or a new structure, there'll continue to be damages and potential mold issues. So the Parks and Rec Foundation has agreed to donate $25,000 to help pay for this project. And staff also proposes funding in the amount of $20,000 for a new scoreboard at Arguello Park, and that will be paid for entirely by the Parks and Rec Foundation. So unfortunately, with the storms, we do have a number of landslides that we identified as a result of those storms. And given the recent rains and saturated soil, we're still looking at other locations. So, as I mentioned, the budget is a living document. So as we continue to look at those, when we bring the budget forward in June, there might be an additional request for more funding for some geotech engineers to investigate additional locations, but these are the locations that have been identified as a result of the January storms. So there are 3 of them are at Bing Canyon Park, behind 995 Crestview, above 3144 Britton, and behind 3141 Melody Drive. And there's another $1 million that's been set aside for Dartmouth Road landslide repair. So there are also 2 projects listed related to the general plan that are being brought forward. These costs are being paid for from general plan fees that we collect as part of our development projects. And additional detail on those can be found in your packet. So there's also a number of facility, technology, and equipment needs being requested. So these include Wheeler Plaza garage extra lighting, painting EV stations, filing cabinet system to replace the one that's broken, backup and disaster recovery, a door access system upgrade, an on-base document management system upgrade, a phone system replacement. We're also requesting a plan design for phase 2 of the second floor library remodel and a city hall design for the second floor to better utilize the space that we have. And then the construction of the second floor phase 2 library remodel. Once the existing tenants move out at the end of next year, that space will be open so we can use it for city staff. Also included is a budget for citywide pole banners, and then finally, industrial equipment and new vehicle purchases at the courtyard. So last fall, the City Council approved and established a child care development fee. So as we're anticipating to start collecting these fees over the next 5 years, we thought it would be good to program the money that we're anticipating into some projects. As we move forward, the projects may change, they'll be more defined in scope, but we wanted to represent that we know the money's coming in, so we wanted to apply it to some projects. So these projects include $5 million for a potential new child care facility development. This could include acquiring, adapting, rehabbing, renovating existing space, or converting to child care, or developing new child care space. $1 million in child care space reimbursements, which might help expedite child care facilities, the development of child care facilities. And $250,000 per year in a family and commercial daycare grant program. This would assist child care providers with the expansion, and we would start making awards of that money once we did have enough money in the fund. So the Park and Lieu Fund, this is dedicated to parks and recreation facilities, and it receives funding from Park and Lieu fees as well as park facility development fees. The projects included in this fund include the Burton Park and Harrington Park maintenance, a parks master plan that will include a new assessment of all city-developed parks, open space parks, recreation facilities, and engage the community to better understand the current needs. And a subset of that master plan is a conceptual design of a community center. Also included are the 2 following projects: a new Arguello shade structure in the amount of $50,000 that the Parks and Rec Foundation has pledged to contribute $10,000 toward, and $800,000 in trail improvements, expansion, and connections. Again, the San Carlos Park and Rec Foundation will cover $20,000 a year for 3 fiscal years for a total of $60,000. So moving to the housing funds, the housing projects are funded through below market rate fees and commercial linkage fees paid for by developers. So we've been collecting this money, and now we're looking to program it and start spending the fund balances down. And so these fees will be used to fund projects in the amount of $48 million over the next 5 years. These projects include Cherry Street below market rate housing acquisition, the affordable housing sites or additional affordable housing site acquisition or construction, and installation of ovens at 817 Walnut. So although we are recommending a lot of capital spending this year, there's still $204 million in unfunded projects. So a complete list of those projects can be found in your packet on page 198. So that concludes my presentation. I am happy to answer any questions, and I know the staff is here as well to answer any specific questions on any projects that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca, for that overview. I'm guessing there'll be more questions on this, otherwise it'll be the shortest budget session ever. No hints from anybody on that. All right, Vice Mayor Dugan.
Sure, I can kick things off. Thank you, Rebecca. It is capital improvement. It gets me excited here in San Carlos. And good overview. I think most of my questions are for Stephen, though.
Get out of your way.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. First, so our sewer system's completely separate from our stormwater system, right?
That's correct.
Okay. But it looks like a couple of the pump stations are like co-located, but it's still separate systems? Not a trick question, but I just saw a couple of like the pump improvement projects were addressing both stormwater and sewer, and I just was wanting to, but they're separate systems. Yeah.
Separate system.
And then, in light of everything that happened with our storms, I guess, what I'm reflecting on is that, our sewer investment, is pretty massive, $7 million a year, and then adding $4 million or so a year in a couple of the out years, like $49.5 million all in on the sewer. And then over the same period, about $9.5 million on the stormwater investment. It was really, when I think of resiliency in our system, it was obviously our stormwater system that really was challenged this year. And I'm just curious, how do we, is it just less expensive to make the upgrades in our stormwater system? I guess I'm just like, I'm surprised the investment has to be that deep in sewer when it's the stormwater system that seemed particularly challenged this year.
So, really from really operational standpoint, really probably storm drain system actually is more expensive to kind of operate and maintain, just because we have just a large flow of water. The unfortunate thing is we really don't have a dedicated funding source, unlike our sanitary sewer system where we actually charge, the sewer rates for the collection and operations and treatment of the system. We don't really have that kind of regular income for storm drain system. So, we kind of manage with the funding that we have available to do whatever work. On the positive side, one of the things that we're trying to accomplish and to at least help, so we don't experience some of the things that we saw earlier this year, is we're working together with Wind Shoreline as well as some of our neighbors, Belmont and Redwood City, to really actually look at possibly obtaining kind of if you will, a blanket permit from the regulatory agencies like Fish and Wildlife, Army Corps, where we can actually do some work prior to the storms arriving to clean out some of the channels so that the culverts, either under Caltrans or are under our own streets are clearer before, that wave of water comes. And it's really unfortunate. It is trying to obtain these permits. Sometimes it really takes almost like, 9 to 12 months to actually get the permits from these regulatory agencies. And so, in essence, we would have to apply for that permit right now, to get a lot of things at the end of the year. So, and it really is a struggle. So, we've had some discussions with some of the regulatory agencies, and they're listening to us. So, I mean, there's some positive steps moving forward, but I think if we work together, again, Caltrans, San Carlos, our neighbors, and Warden Shoreline, I have a really good feel that, we can get some permits where we can start to address something, at least deal with some of the debris within our channels within our city.
I see. So in your view, was that one of our principal challenges? It wasn't so much the maintenance of the system itself?
Yeah, from what I could tell, what happened certainly in late December, early January, it was really kind of a perfect storm, if you will. We had high tides, king tides, where, basically they were unprecedented on, 8 foot. So once the bay is that high, any water within the channels itself, it didn't have anywhere to go. So it tended to essentially fill up the creek banks right up to the brim. Our pipelines actually go into the creek, but they go much lower than the top of the channel bank. So I think, as an example, it was something like if you were to fill your bathtub right to the brim, and you add that one more bucket beyond that brim, the water's going to spill out. And that's essentially what happened, is you just couldn't get any more water into the channel because it was full. Not because of, the pipes weren't operating correctly. It's just it had nowhere to go. The bay was full, it was high, and there was nowhere to release the water other than, into the streets.
Okay. I do want to make sure we're fully maintaining it. So, is it in just spending 5 times as much on sewer versus stormwater? Is that, I understand that you're saying we have the dedicated funding for sewer. Does that mean our stormwater system is kind of fundamentally underfunded and it's degrading over time, or?
Well, we do the best we can with kind of the funding we have. So certainly, we do have our pump stations that we need to maintain, and those kind of regulate the flow out of the channels themselves. We really do try. I think I mentioned to this council, typically we're always about a quarter ahead of the season. So basically, when it's September, October, that's when we actually start planning for the storms itself. And so I really feel very comfortable that work had been done. In other words, we had cleaned out all the storm drains and, catch basin, and ensure that, the pipes were clear. However, you do have to always account for the leaf drop, basically October, November, December. And so we go back once again after the leaf drop to kind of clear the leaves and debris that accumulated. But it is a very big challenge to maintain a storm system when you have limited funds, and you know that you anticipate there is going to be flooding, and you do the best you can.
Got it. And then also noticing, all under the topic of resiliency, we had those, I think you said 11 landslides, and we've got, multi-million-dollar repair projects underway to recover from that. Are there any takeaways or investments in resiliency we can make against future landslides? Is there, is it just a matter of putting the earth back and wondering if it happens again, or did we identify, is there new, drainage out there we need to do in some of our parks, or, how are you guys thinking about that longer term?
So that's an excellent question. Part of these, the landslides occurred kind of in our own open space parks, and will have geotechnical engineers go out and kind of assess, as soon as kind of the soil kind of dries out, to kind of get a better handle on what they anticipate the type of improvements would be done. At that time, I think, what we would want to do is maybe, quiz them in regards to, do they see any other weak points or other areas that are potential slides that we could kind of try to prepare for. It's a big area, but we certainly, the way soil kind of is built, right, a lot of times they predict certain areas that, perhaps are more prone to landslides than others. And so, it is something that I think we're going to have to study and consult with them to kind of get a little bit better handle. Some of it could be as easy as perhaps, doing a little bit of additional drainage or, some type of under subterranean drainage just to divert the water so that it doesn't kind of slip beneath the surface and cause the slide to occur.
Got it. Yeah, I would fully support anything proactive, especially with the risk assessment of what's underneath it, a resident or what have you. I have some other questions on streets, but I'll let my colleagues go next.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Mayor Dugan. Councilmember Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Stephen, I have two questions for you and one for Rebecca, so I'll ask you first since you're already up there. On all this wastewater project work that we do we use outside contractors or do you use public works staff, or is it a combination? Because it's a lot of work, right?
It is. So for most of the work that a lot of the contracts that bring before you, it's typically all contractors. So basically their plans that we prepare, we identify the location, and then if they go in, and for instance, if it's the sewer main replacement project, they know specifically the areas that they need to go to, and then they actually remove and replace, for the most part, those sewer mains as well as the laterals. There might be some instances where we might have a spot repair that has to be taken care of right away, in which case that would be handled by our internal staff. And I've seen the work that our staff does, and they do comparable, if not better, than many of our contractors.
Are the contractors specialists? I mean,
Yes.
That's pretty much what they do is...
Right. They have the specific license, but usually what we find is they're capable, obviously, and they have the experience and the tools and how to go about repairing or replacing a sewer main.
And the second question, and thank you for that. We just had a discussion about the North Crestview Park project, and who knows what that will result in. I think 6 years ago we were going to spend about $450,000, if I remember. This project will undoubtedly be more because I assume there will be, more things involved. And whatever that number is, somewhere north of 500,000. I noticed that it has a number in the Park in Lieu fund. How will we budget that out of that fund, or will we take it out of general fund, or I don't know, maybe that's creeping into Rebecca's territory.
I got it. So I think if I understand the question correctly, I mean, we've budgeted the money to do the study, the plan itself, but we haven't looked at budgeting any money for an actual project, because at this point, we're just starting this process. So we don't have any idea, if you're going to want an open space park there or Disneyland. And so there's, quite a few options in between those two with quite a few different dollar amounts. So this is an example of, you put money into your budget and, some of that is programmed specifically for projects, and some of it's available and will be turned into projects. Other things, it's just a step process. So, I mean, I would guess that either in next year's mid-year update, if we're far enough along in that plan and we've gotten, a good indication from the plan and the council of what direction we're heading, then we'll start to build engineer estimates into the budget for what the actual project would cost to do. So it's, as Rebecca said in the beginning, the budget is a live document. It's changing every day, all the time. And, many of the decisions and items that come before the council do exactly that. They have that direct impact on the budget.
All right, so we can just worry about that when it occurs. All right, and I think the other question I had was for Rebecca regarding child care funds. I mean, we've created this child care fund, and it's growing quite impressively. But I'm wondering specifically, how do we use it? You mentioned about helping child care providers expand, for example. In other words, if they needed to rent more space at an adjacent building or go to a new building, would that be a use of those funds?
I am actually going, is Adam here? Yes. I'm going to have Adam answer that question. As I said before, we haven't received any money yet. We're just anticipating receiving the money. So because we've had the money budgeted, we wanted to show some ideas of how it could be used, so.
Adam Aronson, Economic Development Housing Manager. So any funds that come from the child care impact fee, they have to go towards capital improvement costs for the child care providers. And so that has to go towards something that expands their ability to increase the number of spaces. And so we've developed 3 different CIPs that could approach that. One of them is like a child care grant reimbursement program. So that would be grants to providers if they wanted to expand their operations that would allow them to then serve more students.
Okay. All right. So, but let's say I'm a child care provider and I want to move into a new space. I've got to come up with the rent, but you'll reimburse me for all the improvements I have to make in the space. Is that the way it would work?
Theoretically, it could go towards that. We still need to develop the grant program. That's something we want to work on over the next year and with all of you. But that is something it could go towards.
And what are the things that they could not use the money for?
Staff salaries, subsidizing the costs for students to attend, things like that.
Okay. That was it for me. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Collins. Councilmember McDowell.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Stephen's back in the hot seat. It's the Stephen show now. Sorry, Rebecca. Spotlight's off you for a minute. Stephen, a couple questions.
Yes.
Just wondering, is our sidewalk backlog caught up? Like how much time does someone spend on the wait list now to get their sidewalk done?
It should be, fairly quickly. Yeah, we're pretty much caught up as far as the backlog. I'm also looking at, actually working with a different style where we actually do horizontal saw cutting, and that certainly takes much less. It's typically could be done in an hour, and that will reduce some of the tripping hazards. And so we're looking to probably utilize that method a little bit more, and because it's done fairly quickly, the cost is very low, and so in many instances we don't even approach the adjacent property owner because the cost is relatively low.
Oh, wow. So we just carry the cost ourselves.
Correct.
Oh, great.
It would be part of the sidewalk replacement program.
Okay. Okay. So typically if someone writes in and gets on the list, they're on the list for less than a year?
Oh, certainly. Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's wonderful news. Thank you. You also talked about the sediment removal along industrial because industrial flooded. Is there anything we can do along El Camino? Because I know that experienced a lot of flooding too.
So that is something that, we also, as I mentioned on industrial and certainly underneath 101, we had that discussion, or we want to have the discussion with Caltrans. But El Camino is also kind of in their jurisdiction. And so that is another thing that we certainly need to, have that discussion with. But part of the flooding, as I mentioned to Councilman Verdugan, is, just actually getting that water into the Cordilleras Creek. And a lot of that is a result of that portion of, or the pipeline that goes in the creek right at the El Camino. And so, certainly that was a challenge. We know during that period of time, that area was, completely flooded, and it goes across the railroad tracks and in that portion of that high school on the other side of the track. So we do know that, that segment from essentially El Camino all the way, really from industrial, it was a backlog or surcharge, if you will, because of all the debris that was actually in the creek. So, this is another thing of, kind of working together, making sure that all the debris is removed as best you can. In some cases, you can't remove it because it occurs during the middle of a flood, but you do the best you can to remove any debris that you can reach, at the time.
Thank you. Thank you. One other question about electric lawn equipment. One of the emails, and I'm sure my colleagues get it as well, is to get rid of our gas blowers. And so I think the public will be really excited that we're making that transition. We have some contractors that do park maintenance as well, right? Are they making the transition as well to electric lawn equipment?
Let me kind of ask Lou Durant.
Hi, Lou.
Lou Duran, Public Works Superintendent. So we have had that conversation with our contractors. They haven't transitioned over just yet. We're working with them this year to be on track for 24. I think the mandate comes in 24. They haven't committed to doing that, but we are talking to them about that at this time.
Okay, great. I think it would be great that the city takes a leadership role on that, and that we can also let our public know that the city's making that transition. So
Yeah,
that's good to know.
city's starting this year to be able to transfer our equipment over. So then that will be by 24 that we'll be fully switched over.
Okay. And how are our staff charging? Are we investing in a lot of battery packs, or how? I know that's kind of a.
So for the lawn equipment, we do have smaller backpacks and smaller chargers at the yard. We're using multiple batteries. Those batteries can get quite heavy when you're holding them on yourself or on a tool belt. So we're using multiple batteries, and we have charging stations that charge on a regular 110 outlet.
Great, thank you. Sure. I have other questions, but I'm going to yield my time, and we'll do maybe a second round, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dowell. No. Okay. I had a few questions, and I'll jump in, and then we'll go for round two. I'm going to start with, I think this one is Al for this one. I had a question about the open space element update. Is that you, or is that somebody else? Okay. I'm glad I said that before I made you walk all the way up.
Hello, good afternoon.
Lisa. So I noticed this is in here, and I think Al, when he made the presentation, mentioned this is a new requirement, or is this something that we're required to update at this point? And can you just tell me what is the open space element?
Sure. The open space element is one of the 7 state-mandated elements or topics that every general plan must address. So these could be areas that are kind of more wild, more open, or they can be more program spaces for people to use, like hiking and trails and so forth. And so this actually was part of new state legislation that was passed last year and then went into effect this year. And this new legislation requires that cities all across California, cities and counties, municipalities, update their open space elements by January 1st, 2026. So we have to get it done in the year 2025. And the impetus of this was that some cities, specifically when I was reading the legislation, it noted that one city hadn't updated its open space element for like 50 years. So it's a state mandate. They want everyone to do it. And it has to do with really kind of like with 3 themes, like making sure that the open space is accessible. So making sure that happens, and to take advantage of some resiliency related objectives related to climate change. And then we'll also look at, how do we preserve and enhance our existing open spaces, and also look at one term they used was rewilding. So if there's opportunities to rewild areas, that's one of the main themes. So that's essentially why we're doing it, because it's a state mandate.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
My second one is for Stephen. I think the next 2 will be for Stephen, and then I think we should just get you a separate chair there, Stephen, just to sit there. I think in our strategic plan, we talk about sort of, and I know you're doing certain things around conversion to electricity around EV charging at Wheeler Plaza. As mentioned earlier about some of the equipment, and I know the fleet is sort of as things turn over. But what I didn't see in here, and I thought was sort of part of that process, was to sort of explore and look at sort of how we get more deployment of EV chargers throughout the city on public space, at parks, maybe on the parking lot in the library. Is that somewhere in the plan, or what's sort of the thought around that?
So the city manager and I actually had an extensive discussion on that, and certainly, as we had, and as council is well aware, we have just completed the adding of three additional EV stations within the Wheeler Garage. So there's a total of 6 there, as well as three chargers underneath the bottom floor of the library garage. But this certainly does make a lot of sense as far as adding, some additional EV stations, probably more at some of our city facilities, like as you mentioned, maybe the additional library, DVU center, places that we control. But to answer your question, is there a project that included an EV station, specifically, or EV stations specifically, and it does not, and it is something that we probably should include, going forward, perhaps making like two EV stations at various city facility parking lots, going forward, and just kind of make that as part of the program moving forward. And so it's not included in the budget, but perhaps that's something that, council will direct us to include.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested in having that discussion with council and maybe even to your point, like at the courtyard, you have employees coming in, or where there's other employee parking opportunities to do that as well. So, and my second question is also sort of more long-term, and I think we've had some of these discussions around, with resiliency in terms of recycled water and getting sort of the purple pipe. Is there any sort of thought around, or any process that we can sort of engage to try to budget for that, do work on that? I think it's get that sort of moving in our direction to connect into San Carlos.
So, unlike Redwood City, City San Carlos is not a water purveyor. So typically, what the local water purveyor actually kind of controls the recycled water. So they control all sources of water. So, and so Cal Water is our water purveyor. So I've had extensive discussions with them, and I said, this is something that I know our council is very interested in extending, from the Silicon Valley treatment plant and bring it across. And certainly, it does make a whole lot of sense, especially with all the activity that's going on within Industrial Road, where in many instances that buildings could be double plumbed, where essentially the toilet facilities could be plumbed for recycled water, yet the other sinks are for regular potable water. Certainly, any of the outside landscaping, could be used. And in fact, in many instances, if they have boilers, a lot of that recycled water could actually be used in some of the boilers that they may have. And so I have had that discussions. I know Cal Water has indicated they are interested, and they are in, if you will, preliminary discussions. I want to actually have a little bit more detailed discussion, and not only have preliminary discussions about what is the next steps, or what is their schedule as far as moving the recycled water over, and bringing it into San Carlos.
Okay, and that would be we'd have to work with Silicon Valley Clean Water and Cal Water.
That is correct.
And who's our board member for Silicon Valley Clean Water? Is that, all right.
And I'll make a comment if you like.
And
all right.
I'm done with my questions, so I'll turn it to Ron and then Brent.
And thank you, Stephen, for bringing that up. This is just a comment on this specifically. I don't really have any other questions. But a couple things. Silicon Valley Clean Water is working on a long-term project. This is not going to solve our problems short-term, but they are working on a project to transfer about 6 million gallons of treated water every day that comes out of that facility back up into the reservoir, because it'll be potable quality. But that's going to take, hundreds of millions of dollars. It'll take federal grants. It's probably going to take about 10 years. But that project is moving forward. There's been a lot of work done. I was surprised to learn that, and very happily surprised. And it also made me think maybe we should have them come and make a presentation, a report to our council at some point in the future about how, what's involved in that project and how it'll benefit us in Belmont and Redwood City and West Bay.
Good information.
Councilmember Venkatesh.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. You already asked my question. It was regarding EV chargers, so thank you.
You're off the hook. So we can go back. I think it's Vice Mayor Dugan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think this question's for Jeff, but you might redirect. Child care, big priority. We did a lot of good work last year putting that child care and lieu fee fund together. I'm excited to see that. It's showing up here in our budget in 2 places that add up to $8 million. So that's really cool, potentially very impactful. My question is, I see it divided into 2 uses, $5 million and $3 million. And I guess as I was working and helping to put that together, I was thinking it would all be in this first bucket, which is going to providers of new child care facility development and kind of getting, 2 providers to provide more child care. And so I want to make sure I'm understanding the second bucket, because I was a little surprised by it. It sounds like we're going to dedicate $3 million to basically, a developer develops a big project on the east side. They dedicate some of their space to child care. And we do collect the fee from them, but then we give it back to them. Is that what's going on in this fund?
Yeah, I think Adam could explain this better than I could.
So it's a good question. So the way that program works is it's not a reimbursement of the fee. It's for them to go beyond the fee or beyond what they're providing. So this would be hypothetically a project comes in where they want to provide on-site childcare, and our code says they have to provide 50 spaces. They could theoretically say, hey, we'll do 100 spaces if you pay for those extra 50 spaces. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the reimbursement would come in and be going beyond their requirement, not just the standard requirement.
And then I think the way that you should think about the child care aspects of the budget right now are they're aspirational, right? We're trying to show the categories where we think you could be spending this money. It's rather limited, right? But we don't, this isn't what we're actually necessarily proposing to do at this point, right? We haven't even collected most of this, or any of this money really yet. And so, once we know the council's had an interest in having a grant component for in-home child care providers to be able to expand their facility. We know that's something you'd like to see. But, perhaps, what we're envisioning right now that, that might be a few $100,000s a year that gets doled out, that might turn out to not be the right amount. There may be millions of dollars, of applications for that, in which case we'd come back and say, well, wow, we were really surprised and we think maybe we have this ratio wrong and we should move some of the money from over here to over there. So it's really more like opportunities right now.
I see, that helps. I guess my input, and we'll be figuring this out over time, to your point, is let's keep in mind that if a developer's putting childcare in and wants to go even beyond, they're probably doing that because there's a demand for among their own anticipated tenants, and they might well be doing that for their own purposes. So I am much more, I guess I don't want this money necessarily going to commercial property developers. I would much rather see it going towards childcare operators. So between the 2 funds, my heart and mind is certainly more on the first one. So that's just my feedback. And then I think I'm back to Stephen. You're sitting closer now, great. So street and sidewalks, love the investments we're making in those areas. On the streets, there was a statement in here that I just wanted to clarify. I'm on page 158, but it says, so this is our, $37 million investment in street resurfacing, and it says to achieve this, approximately 30% of city streets will be under construction per fiscal year. And I was just trying to understand that. We're like long streets, so just like there might be a portion of the, because we're not going to touch 1/3 of our streets every year.
Well, I think the best way we could probably handle it is, you like to try to keep the contractor as tight in an area as possible because it's just ease of maintenance and or convenience. However, you also realize that that does cause a major inconvenience to the kind of local neighborhoods as far as, getting into their homes and stuff. So we do try to spread it out. However, we'd still like to, knowing that, we have to pave these streets, there's going to be a lot of streets that are actually going to be under construction, or, whether it's kind of doing some of the pre-work, a lot of underground utility, making sure that gets done first, and then we come back and do all the, the surface type of treatments where it's related to this paving or, concrete work, sidewalk work, what have you.
Okay, yeah, I was just surprised, 30% just, yeah, that's dramatic.
It's going to be very dramatic. Yes.
But you alluded to my second question, which was, we're also making this, very significant investment in our sewer system. I'd imagine you guys are working to really, line up those projects. We certainly want all that sewer work done before we resurface. Is that how you guys?
That's how we do it.
Yeah.
And, we also will need to reach out to Cal Water and the other utilities, whether it's Comcast. I mean, generally that's going to be their aerial, infrastructure, but we want to make sure whatever is underground that kind of gets addressed first. So that, we could actually go in afterwards and then kind of repave the streets or, address the street surface improvements.
Got it. And I'll just add my 2 cents on, and I think we've talked about it before, kind of the blacktopping versus that street slurry thing. And I'll just say, at least on my quiet street where kids play in the street, basketball hoops, that kind of thing, the street slurry was significantly not well received. It's so if it happens to be a quiet kind of kid-friendly street, that might be a factor not to use the street slurry. It's tough surface for kids and balls and kind of everything on a quiet street. And then a quick question on, so we all hear a lot from our residents on Crestview Drive and folks driving fast. I see it sounds like this project is adding 3 traffic circles on Crestview. Am I reading that right?
Actually, I believe it's a single.
Okay.
At Edmonds in Crestview.
Oh, and then at Morse and Rosewood
Morse.
separate. Got it. Okay, yeah, I misread that. So one roundabout. And I would just say, those are not everyone's going to like that. So I hope we're planning some public outreach on that.
And in fact, we have met with a lot of the neighbors, certainly on Edmonds, in that discussion, because they really feel, because as you're heading towards Edgewood, the cars pick up speed, because knowing that they're going headed towards 280 and some of those cars on it was really drive pretty fast. They pick up speed there. So by actually having this traffic circle, we're anticipating that at least they'll slow down and certainly allow the people or the cars on Edmonds at least an opportunity to kind of make their left or right turns onto Crestview. Got
it. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that, Stephen. And then I've got one more quick question for Will on IT. We don't get to talk to you very much. And, it certainly doesn't compare to our street, sewer, and sidewalk budgets, but I know you've got a significant fiefdom of your own right. And I just wanted to get kind of a high-level understanding of, where that architecture's heading, just in the sense that, $180,000 on the content management system and $100,000 on backup and disaster recovery. And I don't know, I'm sure my view is overly simplified, but wouldn't everything just end up hosted on Microsoft 365 or something and be significantly less expensive than that?
Well, that's the direction everything's going. We're moving most of our stuff to the cloud. For example, OnBase, which is document management, will go to the cloud. The backup is, we have to back up the data in Microsoft Office 365. Right now, our data, we don't have a lot of data there yet, but once we start moving data there, we do need to back it up. Microsoft has resiliency, but they don't back up your data.
I
so
see.
if someone deletes it, It's gone.
Got it. So even if you're fully on Microsoft, it's a second whole system that's keeping it redundant. You can't just pay Microsoft a little more to keep a second.
Well, their system's redundant, so for their failure, but if we have someone go in and, for like ransomware encrypted data, they don't have too many tools in place for that. Or if someone goes in and deletes data accidentally, so they're not covering that, they're just covering their side of it.
I see. And these spends, they're not going on a server in a server rack somewhere. These are cloud spends.
No, most of these will on base and the backup will mostly be. We still have some on-prem, but on base and the backup will be more likely. Well, on base will be cloud, and then the backup will be a combination of both.
Cool. Yeah. No, I just wanted to get a general sense of where you're taking it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
On the cloud.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 4 questions, but 2 will be quick, if that's okay.
Okay, well, I mean, John went over his quota, so I think you're okay.
He had like 7, so.
It's only 4 o'clock. We have 5 more hours.
Can't make this meeting more longer so that next year is shorter. Doesn't count.
Oh, yeah, for John. Okay, one quick one for Stephen, please. And this builds on what John mentioned about underground work before we're paving the streets. And I know that you guys work to replace the sewer laterals and stuff like that. On my street, we got a new street, and it's beautiful. And about 30 days later, Thomas James came in, and well, actually, PG&E came in for a Thomas James project to cap the gas line. So I'm wondering if you guys coordinate with community development on the permits that are coming in. Because all that, we all know PG&E takes a little bit of time to get on their schedule. So how does that work with community development?
So we do meet with PG&E, and they kind of provide us, and certainly we actually tell them, these are the streets that we're planning to do, and so whatever you need to do, to accommodate whatever work they have within those streets, we ask them to do that way before. And we typically try to give them, certainly at least a year before to kind of give them a heads up that this is what we like to do. What we also find, and typically what we'd like to do is we tell all the utility companies we have a 5-year moratorium, right? Where once we pave the street, we don't want you to cut it. The important thing is, we do know that there are situations where you might have a gas main that's leaking. We can't have a gas, or not gas main, but a gas service that's leaking. You can't have a gas lane kind of continue, and so you realize you will have to cut. The other thing that is hard to control is when if you're in a neighborhood, a resident that does decide to replace their sewer lateral, and they may not even know they need to do it when we're doing the work, but 2 months after we complete the work, they realize, oh, my sewer lateral's kind of failed, and I have to do it. So obviously, you have to make exceptions. So you do the best you can. We do try to let, in this case, PG&E know very early enough, but sometimes it just doesn't always work out.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering if it's possible that our systems or our staff, or I know that Public Works and community development are separate, but is there a way that we can check, because we probably knew about the Thomas James project quite a bit in advance. Is there a way that those projects can be flagged for Public Works, knowing that it's going to go all electric?
Yeah, and this is something, I think maybe Al and Andrea and I probably need to sit down and, come up with a means, to kind of flag these things so we kind of, catch them early on,
That's fair enough. Thank you. My next question, I think, is for Amy. It's about the banners. I'm really excited that we're going to invest in banners, and I think we'll find a lot of fun things to do with them for our centennial. We have talked as it's been a while since Adam and I have met with the Industrial Arts Business Association, but in prior conversations, we had talked with them about placemaking down there. And I'm wondering if you have a figure for how much potentially banners in that neighborhood might cost.
I do. So banners, let's see. A full set of banners for the industrial arts area would be $40,000. Full set of industrial will be 25.
Correct. Yeah, downtown.
Okay, thank you. We would probably print something different on banners for.
Just confirming, so I give you all the right information.
But these banners were not included in the budget. This would be extra that the council would have to discuss.
The only banners included in the budget were the Laurel Street and El Camino banners.
Got it. And so if we were to do industrial arts, and obviously we would have to talk with the business association, so 25K, but that would also require us to print perhaps special banners that say Industrial Arts District. It wouldn't be like Welcome to San Carlos or something. I think they would be looking for something that's special to their district to really make it stand out. Is that included in that 25K, or that would be additional?
So that's just one set of banners, and it depends on whatever messaging you would want to include on those banners. So messaging that we have proposed in the project that's included is highlighting some of our events, the shop local, some of those traditional messages that have already been included. It's updating those banners and giving them a fresh new look. So if we want to be consistent with that messaging, we've planned for 10 to 12 sets of banners for Laurel Street and El Camino. If there's different messaging that you would want to include in the industrial arts, we can, either set a number and then decide on a number of sets and then decide on messaging.
I see.
And then also to note that that was done a few years ago for the community development, a project of city branding. And there also were poles that were utilized at Burton Park and Loreola and Highlands. So 3 parks were included also in that we have not included in the proposed budget. So the proposed budget, again, is just Laurel Street and El Camino.
Okay, thank you. And then I have one more question for you, Amy. I wanted to talk a little bit about the turf proposal for Harrington and what I believe is the baby playground, the grassy portion of the baby playground, right?
And the 5 to 12, both playground areas at Burton Park, correct.
But the 5 to 12, that would be that new rubber surface, right? Or is that going
to? No, it's the synthetic turf on kind of those grassy knolls that
between
come
the
up.
sandbox and the playground.
Yeah.
Okay, so 3 places of turf.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just talk about the thought process that went into turf? I'm a little concerned regarding Harrington Park because we're talking about redoing that park at some point.
Right.
I'm a little concerned about Harrington Park also because a lot of people walk their dogs downtown, and there's, the pet waste bags there at Harrington Park because pets use Harrington Park to go to the bathroom. And I know that dog pee on turf, it's really kind of hard to, dissipate. So I don't know, could you just talk a little bit about that project?
Sure. So the areas, Lou and I have discussed this for several years. So first, they're all high traffic areas, and they're also areas that we have shaded trees above them. So it is difficult to grow the grass. The Burton Park play areas, high traffic. So it's a constant maintenance. And for all the work that Lou and his crew puts in, it's not looking as nice as we would like it to, and to meet our standards. And so to kind of balance both the high use, the difficulty in when we reseed and aerate and having that grass really establish and regrow. So that was the reasoning for Burton Park. Harrington also difficult because the grass area does fall under all those shaded trees. There are products out on the market that are for areas where dogs would be using it. And we can look further into that. But I also feel like there was maybe a timing issue, and that was proposed last fiscal year in the mid-year, or I'm kind of missing on my timing, but I think that is something to consider as you're considering a downtown precise plan and improvements to Harrington Park. The timing just might not work out, so that's maybe something for council to consider.
Okay, thank you, Amy. So I'm going to circle back on that during discussion, because I do think that we should probably have a talk about whether that item is pulled from the budget. And my final question is for either Al or Adam. I want to talk about the ovens at 817 Walnut, please. So I cut the ribbon at 817 Walnut a year ago, 11 months ago. And we talked back then about the ovens, and there's no full-size oven in these affordable units. Residents had emailed me saying that, it was something that they felt was really missing in those units. And what I was told at that time was that, no problem, we can switch it out, we can get it fixed. The city graciously stepped up and said, we're gonna pay for it, no problem. So I guess I was caught a little off guard that this is still in our budget, and I'm just wondering what's happened in the last year. I'm a little embarrassed that it's here, so I'm all ears. I'm just wondering what's going on.
So they've had to undertake architectural and electrical studies to make sure that the new ovens will fit in, and they have to reroute some of the wiring and things like that. And so they came to us about a month ago saying that they're about ready to begin requesting the funds to install the ovens. And that is where we're at now.
And all those studies took a year?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm extremely disappointed that this has taken a year. I'm not blaming you. I guess I'll circle back during discussion. I guess I would like to propose that the council receive updates on this in 3 months and in 6 months, and I'd like a timeline. I feel like this has been delayed too long, and I just feel like this is substandard housing, and that's not what we as a city are doing. It's really important to me that we're providing affordable housing that's just as nice as market rate. And we would never let a developer come up here and propose market rate housing and then something substandard for their affordable units. And this is something that the residents have come up to me and said without me even asking, that the ovens are something that they really are missing. And I don't want them to feel like they're getting something less than rate for affordable units. Everybody should have a nice place to live where they can cook. So I will, I'll look for my colleagues to chime in during discussion time about how we make this happen more quickly. Thank you.
Okay. I had one question, and I think then we can probably move to discussion. And mine is, it's sort of a bigger picture question, so I don't know if it covers Rebecca, Al, maybe Stephen. You guys can decide who wants to answer for this one. We're scheduled to complete the downtown specific plan in March or so of next year. And so as we think about budget for next year, for next fiscal year likely, or maybe the end of this fiscal year, I assume we will want to go into, I know we don't know the numbers right now, but we'll start looking into planning and potentially projects and construction around that. I would just like, as we look at the big picture for all of these, we've got a significant amount of capital projects. We've got $200 million behind it, and I would hate to not have money for downtown. So I want to understand, are we sort of extending ourselves too much that we can eventually pay for these capital projects for downtown without having to wait 10 years for them?
Right. Well, there's two answers to that question, of course. It depends on what you settle on doing on downtown. How grand is it going to be? We don't. I don't have a
Disneyland.
Right. I don't have a sense of that yet in terms of all those things that are going to be involved. But in our discussions with our negotiating team on development agreements, that's the area where we're looking, on, for the first really whole batch of projects to have the lion's share of the money going towards that as sort of the current crown jewel community benefit. So, we're confident you're going to have, quite a bit of money, and we're confident that we would be able to add more money. But, what ultimately the price tag is going to be, that's what we just don't know yet. So we know you're going to have a lot of money. You're going to be able to make a lot of changes. We know that there's likely going to be a good ongoing source of money flowing in over time. You probably, where we talked before about being able to do things in the downtown in phases. You're not going to do just everything all in one project on all the multiple blocks. So I think it looks really good right now from what we know, but the one really big missing piece is, what is it we're going to do?
No, and that's understandable. We haven't finalized. I just don't want to, if we need to have 10 or 15 or 20 million to do certain phases, that we're sort of, locking ourselves out of that by some of these other projects, which are important as well, just that we've sort of highlighted that as a priority.
When you can see those fund balances that we're drawing on, you could see that, we're not proposing taking them super low. There's still quite a bit of money there. And, based on the performance of the city's finances over the last decade and looking forward to the next one, we would expect you would see similar performance. So that means you're going to be generating additional budget surpluses that are going to, flow the same way that the former ones have flowed into those balances, so that you'll have, in the future, money that you currently don't have, but you'll receive and will flow to those funds.
Okay. And then just, I guess, as a follow-up for that, Jeff, and sort of the bigger picture, or Rebecca, on that, we've got funding, I believe, it may be in a previous item, just around planning around the community center. And that, so I'm just sort of, at some point, the money's got to come from somewhere for these things. The community center is not an inexpensive endeavor for us. So I guess my question is, are we being smart to put that in the budget now versus waiting till next fiscal year to see if it's even possible, given how much the downtown may cost us? And we only have we're going to have a limited number of dollars coming in from the developers. Mm-hmm. So.
That's right. You can have plans that sit around on the shelves for quite a while, and that's sometimes not a bad thing, because there are sometimes funding sources that come out of left field, large grant funding sources when you have a big economic downturn, and all of a sudden, the state and the feds are like, hey, if you have shovel-ready projects, we have money, we want to stimulate the economy, that kind of thing. So it doesn't really go to waste. You always have the opportunity of looking at future tax measures and going to the taxpayers and saying, would you guys like to fund this project? And, my experience with those types of things in the past has shown, if you can show the community what you're talking about and what the plan is, they're a lot more likely to at least consider it when you do that. So there's a lot of different ways that that seed could germinate over time to go from concept to reality. But without taking the first step, you're never going to get there.
Okay. No, that's fair. I appreciate that. Okay. I didn't have any other questions. I don't see any other questions. So I know we'll have some discussion, but let's go to public comment.
There are no hands.
Everyone loves our budget. All right. How about in the chambers, anything? Any public comment? Okay. With that, I will turn it over to council discussion on these items. Does anyone want to kick that off? And if not, I will mention that to Councilmember McDowell, I was going to raise here the question about Harrington Park, at least at a minimum, that we should not fund that at this point, given that we're going to be modifying it. So I'm open on the Burton Park piece, but I think we should, at least the Harrington Park piece, we should pull off as a budget item. And then, but I'm happy. Oh, Councilmember Venkatesh.
Oh, I was just going to say I agree.
All right, that's 3. Okay. Vice Mayor Dugan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll chime in and say, sure, yeah, let's hold off on Harrington Park until we know what we're doing there. And I was, that project, if you add up those 2 patches, it was like $76 a square foot, which I know would competitively bid that, but that seemed like a lot of money per foot on that. And then, just generally, this is a really exciting capital budget in particular. I'm very excited about being able to make a real impact on our what have been degrading streets. So that's fantastic. The sewer investments and the wastewater investments, storm water investments are going to be impactful, and I'm glad we also have money for that landscape repair, and really just hope we keep that mind on resiliency. I'm glad we added that aspect to our goals this year. As we think through all those projects, they relate to our changing climate, our changing weather, and with our hills and with just drainage in town, we're exposed for sure. And then near and dear to my heart, the safe routes to schools. Glad, I think we just certified that 2 months ago or a month ago, and here it is, nearly fully funded. So I think that's great. It speaks a lot to our commitment as a community on what's important, keeping our kids safe and getting them to schools, and I love seeing those investments in our sidewalks too. So I'm very excited about this large investment we're making into our community. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember McDowell, and then Councilmember Collins.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to propose increasing the budget by $30,000, more as a placeholder because we still need to have a conversation with the business groups, but for banners in the Industrial Arts District. I think it's a great opportunity, if we're working on this anyway, to really make a bold move in placemaking down there, and I think that would mean a lot to them. So I'd like to propose that in the budget. And I would like to just give direction to staff to report back to the council. It could be in the council newsletter or a memo. It doesn't have to be at a meeting, in 3 months and in 6 months, on the oven situation, please. So I guess I'm looking for agreement there. And I too, like what John just said, I am very excited about this budget. I think that we're making a huge impact in our community with our roads and our sidewalks and our sewer and stormwater. I think our last budget was really about staff, and this one is really about our infrastructure. And we were hit hard in the storms, and I think that we are actively working on getting things fixed up. So I'm excited about that. I wanted to say to Stephen, this is a lot of money to spend. And a lot of projects. So if you find that you need more staff, or something that would help you get this money out and these projects going as quickly as possible, that to please come back and let us know. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if this is a reflection that I've been on the council too long, but I finally found a budget meeting that I was excited about. They've been excessively boring over the years, but I've been very encouraged by this, and
I'm glad I can make that happen for you, Ron.
Thank you, Adam. I know it's all you, and I congratulate all the staff for sitting through this. But it has been a great process. It has been, detailed without being boring, and I'm very happy about that. It's got kind of something for everything. I'm okay with the oven reports, if you want to call them that, periodic oven reports. I just, I don't want to have a report just to have a report. If staff's got something to say, put it on the agenda. I would want to know more about agreeing to an increase to, what was it, the industrial arts budget? I think I'd want to know more about that. I mean, we've increased our budget in so many places, and I don't want that to be the leading edge of let's increase this category by this much and this much and this much. So if that's a doable, handleable thing. I know we're talking about $30,000 in a $187 million capital improvement budget, but I would like to know more about it before I sign on to it. And that's all I had.
Okay, Councilmember Venkatesh. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my first rodeo, and I opened my binder, and I was so impressed with all the numbers and the positive impact. So it's just very exciting.
Okay. Any other? Okay, go ahead. Vice Mayor Dugan.
Yeah, I'll just chime in to say that I'm comfortable offsetting a $30,000 investment with what we're going to save in turf in Harrington Park. So I would support that.
I could probably live with that.
Okay, and I'm good with the banners as well. I guess the only question I would just have to make sure that we have poles for placement, that it works somewhere, that's all. But from an operational standpoint, but in terms of the cost, I'm happy with that. I did, and Greg may get mad at me, but I'm going to jump back on from a previous item just to mention one thing. If not, I'll bring it up later if I get my hand slapped. On the community foundation funding, I would love to have a discussion about that, because I think we are not enabling them to fundraise by keep adding funding to them versus encouraging them to fundraise. So I would, maybe when we have the next sort of proposal on it, we can have that discussion. So how's that to not get in trouble?
I have a question about that.
By next proposal, did you mean?
When the budget comes up, I think it's a small item. If we either can if there's a discussion about eliminating that small portion since it's not capital, I'd like to just have, I'll just say, I think we should have that discussion.
So leave it in for now, but you're on the fence about it.
Greg tells me we can have the discussion on it now since we've already passed that agenda item.
Well, I mean, you should be able to talk about anything that's on the agenda today in regards to providing us direction for preparing the budget. That's what we're looking, that's the whole purpose of this meeting.
Yeah, I think just adding that afterthought, something that you intended to mention before, is okay at this point.
I intended to mention, but I forgot to mention that I think we should either think about not supporting that or at least not including that in the second year, because to give them some time to plan. But I really think we need to encourage them to do fundraising and not have, us continue to supplement that program. We're going to comment on that?
My only comment was I'm wondering when we're going to get an annual report from them. We didn't just have one, did we? And if we did, my short-term memory loss is really exaggerated.
We haven't had one in a while.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that to let them know you'd like one.
Yeah, May or June or something like that. But it'd be good to get a report from them again. Thanks.
Yeah, and again, we supported it. I think it's a good. I just want to help them, to encourage them to succeed and do fundraising versus giving them seed money again. Did you have something on that? Okay. All right. And then the only other item I had we talked about was sort of EV charging within some of our facilities for our employees, and whether we could consider adding something in the budget for that. If it can't be done this year, not for the next fiscal year, but I wouldn't mind trying to look at, if Stephen tells me it's possible for this year to put some in for the next upcoming fiscal year, I think it'd be worth doing. And I don't know how others feel about that.
I'd support that, and I appreciated Stephen's idea about potentially putting a couple in a park or, other places where the city owns parking. I think that's kind of a good long-term goal and something that we could gradually chip away at, so I would support that.
Yeah, and I don't know what the right number is for that, so Stephen, I would hope you can come back with an idea on what's realistic around that. So, Councilmember Venkatesh.
For the EVs, is that something that Peninsula Clean Energy could help us with?
That is something we'll probably want to look into, but certainly, we have our other contacts, and I'd probably want to work with the CMAP folks who kind of assist in the EV installation at Wheeler Plaza.
Okay, so before I close, are there any other comments from council? Councilmember.
One more.
Collins.
Since I tend to be on this report to council trend here, Cal Water usually comes to us once a year or so. Are they on the horizon?
Just stay there.
It's always good to hear from them.
They can be. I will request if that's the desire of council.
I would like that.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. And I support your oven report. I'm going to call it the McDowell oven report.
And maybe
MOR.
And maybe an allocation to get Stephen a mobile microphone for the next budget meeting.
All right.
So can I just ask for clarification? I didn't quite get where we came down on the grant.
On which grant?
The foundation, the increase to the foundation grant.
I don't know that we have an answer on it.
I would support the grant, but I would also support, do we have a community foundation subcommittee? I think maybe we used to, but we don't anymore. Not anymore.
Yeah, I think that was just for the formation of it as an outside entity.
Okay. I mean, maybe there could be a meeting to talk about capacity building.
Right, and again, I don't want to pull the rug out from under them, so I wouldn't propose it for this coming fiscal year. I just think maybe the next fiscal year, we would remove the funding there so that they have some time to ramp up on that. And we could always put it back in later if we wanted to, but at least I feel like we're sending a message that you need to start doing capacity building. We're not going to keep funding this. That's sort of my intention.
So you would keep the funding in for this coming?
For this coming fiscal year, but remove it for the next fiscal year, and we can always put it back in for the 25, is it 25 fiscal year? But keep it for 24.
I guess I would like to get some kind of update from them if they're actively fundraising and having success, and we can augment that and further help our nonprofits. I'm not looking to, be creating incentives for them here without really understanding where they're at.
I'm fine with that. That's why I think, per Ron's point, if we can get a report from where they are on that would be helpful. Okay, we good? All right. I think John wants me to be done after 5. All right, I just want to, I'm really happy with how this budget came together. I'm glad it was interesting for Councilmember Collins finally after a number of years.
For the right reason. Redwood City is also having an interesting budget session, but for the wrong reasons.
And just thanks again for all the hard work for this. I think we're all, as you can tell, we're all excited to move forward with this and the implementation, and it's a lot of exciting things. And I want to make sure that we are communicating out to the public all that we're doing here. I think that's important, that we have a good plan to communicate the many good things that we're doing. And thank you all for all the hard work. And with that, I will adjourn.
Budget.
We got lock Cornetta upstairs in the enterprise room.
Yep. So.